Easter Shifter is book 4 in the seasonal paranormal and fantasy romances. Written by Amelia Shaw. Published by Harley Romance Publishing, 2024.
Chapter 1. Abigail. Seeing angels plummet from the heavens like falling stars as a child had always seemed normal to me, especially since everyone else in my family had been able to see them too. But now that I was 25 years old, it was growing tiresome. What had started out as a calling or a gift had soured over time and felt more akin to a chore or duty. Do you ever wish we had been blessed with a different calling? I asked Billy, my cousin on my mom's side. He grunted in response. You know, I've never liked rescuing angels. I know, I said, smiling at him despite his bluntness. But why? Like for real? What's the deeper reason? You can tell me. He groaned in exasperation this time and pushed his unfinished plate away. We were having a 3 a.m. breakfast again. I don't know, he said gruffly, clearly tired. Yes, you do. Come on, Koos. It's just that, well, I'm struggling with all this constant running around too. And I guess I just want to know if I'm being a selfish git, or if. Okay, Abigail. Geez. I waited patiently. Billy was a little rough around the edges, but he was loyal to a fault. I knew that I could call him at any time from anywhere, and he'd come to my aid. No questions asked. He was just that sort of guy. We were lucky to have him. I guess it's just. I want a family and a life of my own. And it feels like all we ever do is run around like mad chooks, chasing after these fallen angels and ensuring they get a good life. They've already had hundreds of years to enjoy being angels, perfect and ageless, and then they get to come down to earth and be human too. We set them up with a comfortable house, a secure job, everything, and most of the time they come with a lifelong partner to sweeten the deal as well. It's just, he cut himself off and sighed. Not fair. I whispered. He nodded with a rueful grimace. Yeah. And I've tried dating and all that stuff, but try explaining to a girl why you must mysteriously rush off in the middle of the night all the time. Or explain why you never have any money to spare beyond daily necessities, because the family works solely to help fallen angels. I want to live. I'm sick to death of being a celestial charity worker. He shook his head. For the first time I saw the true frustration and sadness that hid behind my cousin's anger. I reached for another napkin, slowly tearing it into little pieces, a nervous habit that I knew was puerile but I couldn't seem to shake. I don't know how our parents did it. They got married, helped angels, and somehow still managed to successfully raise us. It seems almost impossible. My dad said they had maybe one fall a month way back when, Billy said. And they didn't set them up the way we do. They were just shoved into a family's home with a spare room, and had to find work of their own. It wasn't all just handed to them, on a silver platter. At least they had to earn their house like everyone else. He shook his head again, clearly battling his inner demons. I reached over to my cousin and took his hand. Listen, I like the way we do things now. Look at Val and Amory, they're doing so well already. It's hard, I know, but seeing them thrive is fulfilling, and I feel good about helping them. Don't you? The grimace on Billy's face told me just how jealous he was of Val's fast happiness. But, I interjected, before my cousin could get too riled up. Maybe it's time we get some more help. Strike out and find some new recruits? He rolled his eyes at me as if I were an idiot. You know we aren't allowed to tell anyone outside of the family about what we do, Abby. The angel's existence must be guarded. They have to remain a secret. And since neither of us have had kids, we're basically stuck doing this for like, what? Another 20 years or more. I licked my lips before anxiously chewing on the inside of my lower lip. The mere thought was overwhelming, almost crushing. Our sacred charge was a heavy burden to bear, and I didn't even know if I could do that, let alone my cousin who was filled with an understandable amount of job dissatisfaction and anger. Maybe I could talk to Val, or some of the other angels that we've helped? I suggested. That wouldn't be breaking any rules or revealing their secret. Perhaps they could step up, help us out by paying it forward? Billy stilled his fidgeting, his gaze flicking up instantly, the spark of hopeful curiosity clear in his gaze. He coughed to clear his throat. Do you really think they might go for something like that? That could really help lessen the burden on our shoulders. I shrugged, offering my cousin a half smile. I don't know, we won't know if we don't ask. It's worth a shot, right? As you said, we're only getting busier with more and more angels seeking a human life. Something has to eventually give. And at this rate, it's going to be our sanity as well as our bank accounts. Billy shifted in his chair, sitting up straighter. Damn. I've got to get home. Work starts at 7 a.m. and I'm exhausted. But hey, that was a good idea, Koos. We'll have to look into it. I grinned at him, my heart swelling with empathy at his stoic nature and the big heart that hid behind it. You deserve a family too, Billy. You'd make a great dad. And I know you've had your eye on Sandra for years, I said, waggling my brows suggestively. Billy looked away, then ran a hand through his hair. Sandy doesn't want me, Abby. She's always dating one guy after another. I'm not sure she's the settling down type. I chuckled softly and leaned forward so my cousin wouldn't miss what I had to say. Billy, she likes you. I know it. Trust me, okay? If you ask her out, she'll say yes. She's just killing time waiting for you to make your move. If she's the one, you can't let her get away, Koos. He met my gaze once more, then nodded, his lips pursed. All right. Thanks, Abby. I'll give it some thought. Good night. He slid out of the booth and headed off to his car, his hands tucked into his jean pockets. I waved after him but didn't follow. Thankfully, I didn't have work in the morning. I was a self-employed hairdresser and I always took Mondays off. It was my me day. Allowing myself some time to think, I ordered another hot chocolate and let my mind skip over the idea I'd thrown at Billy. It had just popped into my head out of nowhere, and yet my brain had been mulling over how to solve our problem for months. It was like serendipity. Our numbers as a team were few, and our resources limited, and yet the number of angels falling seemed to be increasing by the week. It often made me wonder. Maybe heaven isn't all it's cracked up to be? I chuckled to myself. But the idea of recruiting the angels to help us out. It may very well be the answer to all our prayers. We could potentially end up with a system of angels helping angels, where we just be their human liaisons with the world. The possibility of fewer more 3 a.m. rescues buoyed my spirit and put a new spring in my step. The less supernatural work we had to take care of, the more of a life we'd finally be able to enjoy. We could reclaim our lives. I rose to my feet and walked out the front door of the diner. It was obviously shockingly early in the morning, and the crisp chill of the pre-dawn hours still hung in the air. It was kind of nice and refreshing given the warm days we were having. It was late March already, and Easter was just around the corner. I could hardly believe it. Time somehow dragged and raced all at once when you had a higher calling. An unexpected flash of silvery gray caught my eye in the moonlight, and I froze, glancing instinctively toward the verdant tree line. It was dark but bright streetlights lit up the car park for customers. But beyond it, where the pavement met nature, I had definitely caught a glimpse of something in the distance. Something surprisingly large and impossibly swift. It looked almost to be the size of a man, but we didn't have any wildlife that large near these parts. Strange. I shook myself and made a beeline for my car. I was probably hallucinating, truth be told. Sleep deprivation did bizarre things to the mind, I'd heard. There were case studies on it and everything, not to mention the fact it had been used as a method of torture for time beyond memory. It was in my best interest to get home, climb straight into bed and get some quality sleep before I began to believe what my overtired eyes were seeing. Then, after a decent rest, I'd go see Amory and Valentine at their new little cottage in the suburbs. And hopefully, together we'd work out a solution that might benefit us all. God knows I'd love a sleep-in every so often.
Chapter 2. Pascale. My heart raced a million miles an hour. The girl exiting the local diner was too cute for words. With her long blonde hair, gorgeous little upturned nose, and skin as pale and creamy as pure milk, she looked positively delicious. But the more concerning issue, and what I should be most worried about, was that she shouldn't have been able to see me in the first place. No one could or should, except other magicals who knew of me, and I was pretty sure she wasn't one of them. But as I run through the car park in the middle of the early hours, she'd turned to stare directly at me. And in that moment my stomach had dropped, and my heart had thumped hard and fast like a drum. I'd never felt such an incredibly overwhelming sensation. But I hadn't had the time to stop and explore whatever it was. I was far too busy to think about anything except my job anymore, and so I continued on my way, disappearing into the tree line just to be safe. I completed my usual exercise routine, running across most of the state, before following up with some weights. It was high season for us, and all my bunny helpers were gearing up for the madness that was Easter Sunday, our busiest day of the year. So, I couldn't afford to let my fitness drop. If anything, I needed it more now than I did around Halloween or Christmas, when Easter wasn't even a thought on anyone's mind. Deliveries meant speed, so I needed to maintain my A-game. A slow Easter bunny was not something that could be abided. It was unheard of. I'd never allow myself to bring dishonor to my kind. Imagine the shame. When I finally made it back to my hideout, I opened the secret hidden door and slid down the steep chute, sliding down 2 floors before landing on a trampoline which promptly launched me into the first room of the burrow. I brushed the dirt from my hands and quickly unlaced my running shoes. I needed a shower desperately, but now wasn't the time. I had to shift form before I hopped beneath the water, and around Easter it was almost impossible to keep my hold on my human side. The power of the season and work took over, dominating all aspects of my life. I opened the door and walked through the main corridor from which all our rooms fed off. Every bunny and worker down here had their own space, and there were communal living and eating areas that accommodated us all comfortably. There were also the expected workrooms for making chocolates, packing baskets and presents, and organizing deliveries. My friend Robbie greeted me with enthusiasm. "Hey Pascale. Are you just getting home now?" I nodded. "Yeah, I'm a bit late I know, but I was full of energy from the day. I had to burn some of it off, or I wouldn't manage a wink." Robbie checked his watch, one of the only ways we had of telling time beneath the soil. "It's damn close to 4 a.m., he warned. "Great," I said with a grin. "Then there's just enough time for me to grab a quick nap. I'll see you at breakfast." Robbie just smiled and shook his head at my antics as he headed off to the workrooms. We only had night shift workers active the month before Easter to help us keep up with the insane demand. Though we were all rabbit shifters, I was the official Easter Bunny. It was an inherited familial title and position, just like Santa Claus. My father had been the last Easter Bunny, and I was his oldest child and only son. So the honor and burden had automatically become mine. Unlike regular rabbits, our kind didn't birth large litters of babies, but the sex drive was definitely there. The drive to mate and rut was a constant itch that needed to be scratched. And in truth, it was half the reason I worked out and trained so hard. It helped keep my physical needs at bay, at least for a time. After a long day, the shower beckoned with a siren's call, so I gave in like a proverbial moth to the flame. Stretching my limbs, I soaped up and rinsed off, soaking in the relieving heat of the water before taking a hairdryer to my fur. Being unable to shift back entirely to form human at this time of year was a royal pain in the ass. Nothing made me feel less like a man, hell, less human, than having to dry my fur like a bedraggled poodle before I could even crawl into bed. Half an hour later, thanks to the power of our industrial-strength hairdryers, I slipped between the clean sheets of my bed in my very own cool, dark room. After the frantic nature of the season, it felt heavenly to lay down and just be still. With the weight of physically induced exhaustion whispering through every bone in my body, I promptly passed out for a few precious hours of much-needed sleep. Sometime later, I awoke in a damp, hot sweat. "Oh God!" I breathed, wincing against the unexpected pleasure. Then, out of nowhere, images of a woman assaulted me like I'd switched on a movie in my brain. Her lovely blonde hair was spread out over my pillow, her head thrown back in sheer bliss. She reached up and touched my face with a beautiful reverence I'd never experienced. Then she lifted her head and looked straight into my eyes, piercing my very soul. I recognized those eyes. There was no mistaking them. Gasping out loud, I sat up in bed, reaching for my lamp switch. Oh damn. I'd seen that young woman last night in the parking lot by the diner. She was beautiful. Absolutely gorgeous, in fact, but that wasn't what concerned me. She was human and my mate. I knew it. As sure as I was the Easter Bunny, that blonde human was meant to be mine. Talk about timing. Now I had to find her and somehow explain all of this. My whole world, our magical existence. Everything. Damn it. I got up and stumbled straight to the shower, wanting to be rid of the smell of sweat. Yuck. Yet another reason that I hated being unable to shift back to being human, not even for a minute, not until Easter Sunday was done. Then I could relax and wind down for another year. Having washed myself for the second time in a matter of hours, I dried off again and pulled on some pants. It was time to get to work. I grabbed a quick breakfast, then headed to the chocolate workshop. Today, we were making chocolate bunnies and painted eggs, the traditional favorites of kids everywhere. "Hey Tommy," I said, greeting the young rabbit standing at a nearby bench. "Hey Eb," he responded with a grin. I rolled my eyes. I told the young ones a million times that my name was Pascale, yet no matter how many times I reminded them, they seemed determined to call me the Easter Bunny in some form or another. "You know Pascale means born on Easter or Easter child," I said. "It's practically the same." Tommy shook his head with a cheeky gleam in his eye. "Nope, it's not the same, EB." I laughed. Clearly, I wasn't winning this battle of wills anytime soon, so I got back to work. With a concerted effort, I forced my mind to the task at hand, to focus and not think about the woman I'd seen in the early hours. My mate. But my mind kept returning to the most pressing issue. She was human, which meant she wasn't going to understand how I was both a shifter and the Easter Bunny. Learning about magicals at all was too much for almost any mortal to handle. But ultimately, I wouldn't have a choice. I'd have to tell her and hope for the best. However, common sense dictated that I should wait until after Easter to find her and explain. Getting involved and dealing with any potential fallout during the holidays was just an impossible thought. I couldn't compromise my duties like that. Although, I had no way of knowing if I could hold out that long, if my heart could take that sort of punishment. But we'll have forever together, won't we? "You okay, Eb?" Tommy asked me, interrupting my train of thought. I blinked and stared down at my workstation where I'd made the ugliest and most unbalanced chocolate bunny I'd ever seen. Wow. Crap. I let the stress of my situation out in a laugh. "Yeah, I just think I need to take a quick break." "Where are you going to go?" he asked, his brow furrowed. I thought about it for a moment before deciding. I think I might pop out to see Amory. She was a Cupid. I've known her for years now. Tommy frowned at me, a question in his eyes. Was? I nodded. Yeah, she fell in love with another Cupid, and they were forbidden to be together, so they chose to fall together. And now they're human. Tommy grimaced like most boys would do when confronted with the idea of true love and romance. "That sounds kind of lame," he said, his nose wrinkling. I laughed, because Tommy was a typical 16-year-old, despite being a rabbit shifter, and the last thing he could imagine was turning his life upside down and inside out for love. I washed my hands, then waved to him. "I'll see you in a few hours, buddy. Keep up the good work." Tommy nodded and got back it. I walked past 3 other shifters as I made my way back to my bedroom to change into a disguise. Technically, humans shouldn't be able to see me at all, but I still felt strange and a little vulnerable being around humans in my rabbit form. Normally it wouldn't matter because I'd be able to shift back to being a man in the blink of an eye, but being the month of Easter, I simply couldn't. And I didn't make a habit of running around humans in my rabbit form willy-nilly, and I certainly didn't allow the shifters under my care to endanger themselves either. With that in mind, I grabbed an oversized hoodie and pulled the hood up to cover my ears and face. Then came a pair of gloves for my furry hands and large boots for my bunny feet. It felt ridiculously uncomfortable, but I couldn't risk anyone seeing me. Our existence was meant to remain a secret, like that of the angels. And even if our natural shifter invisibility should protect us, I didn't want to take any chances. There was no harm in playing it extra safe anyway. A little discomfort never killed anyone. When I was dressed, I headed out of our burrow and back to the surface. The air was fresh, but it was getting warm out, which of course meant I was already starting to sweat in this damn abomination of a getup. Determined to get my head straight, I started jogging toward town and Amory. By the time I arrived, it was almost 9 o'clock in the morning, and there were people everywhere. Cars drove past at speed, and I kept my eyes firmly fixed on the footpath. When I finally got to Amory's place, I bounded up the steps 2 at a time and made my way to the front door. There were 2 cars parked in the driveway, so I had to hope that Valentine hadn't gone to work yet. Bracing myself, I knocked on the door, my heart pounding from the stress of my recent discovery as much as the strenuous exercise. I really hated not being able to shift back to human form. I really fucking did. This was the perfect moment in which I just needed 10 minutes grace so no one else saw me. The door swung open, and Amory's frown turned into a bright smile. "Pascale. It's so good to see you. Can I come in?" I asked, swallowing a lump in my throat. "Oh yes, of course. Please come in. I have a friend over, but she won't mind." I shut the door behind me and quickly disrobed, throwing my sweaty hoodie, gloves, and shoes to the floor, leaving on just my pants. Amory stood watching me with an eyebrow raised and a playful smirk on her face. "You know, you're lucky Val's not here. He wouldn't like you stripping down in our foyer like this." I stopped with my pants still safely in place. "Listen, I'm in rabbit form, Angel. And I'm still covered from head to foot in fur. I'm not exactly naked over here." Amory laughed, then opened her arms wide for a hug. "I'm so happy to see you, Pascale. What a lovely surprise." I stepped forward and hugged the former Cupid, comforted by her friendly familiarity. "It's good to see you too, Amory." I squeezed her tight. When I let go, my fur suddenly stood on end as another feminine gasp filled the room. I spun around on my heel, and standing right there in the doorway that led to the living room was the woman of my dreams, my beautiful blonde, and very human mate. Oh fuck. Chapter 3. Pascale. You've got to be kidding me. How had this happened? No. This was exactly what I'd been trying to avoid, running into the one human that I didn't want to see. And she could see me, that was for sure and certain. She was staring straight at me, her eyes wide. "Amory, I can't." I wanted to run. I had to. I couldn't afford the overwhelming distraction dealing with my mate would prove to be, not now. Not during the holiday period of my life, the one that defined who and what I was. I turned toward the front door to make my escape. Romance would have to wait. The beautiful blonde put out her hand as though to stop me. "No, please don't go," she said, her voice plaintive and sweet, her gaze beseeching. I stopped at her words, then turned to Amory again. How can she see me? Am I losing my ability to remain invisible, or something? I was sure that I had my cloaking on still, because it wasn't exactly something you had to turn on, it was always active. The hard part was turning it off, to be honest, which is what I had to consciously do if I wanted someone to be able to see me. That was how it worked. Those were the rules. It ensured accidents didn't happen. It kept all rabbit shifters safe. Amory chuckled and put a hand on my shoulder calmly. "Come into the living room, and I'll make us all a hot chocolate. Then we can talk about it." "No," I said, shaking my head, every nerve on edge as I fought my fight-or-flight instincts, and I certainly wasn't going to opt for fight. "I can't." "You can't." I wasn't going anywhere until they told me what the hell was going on. None of this made sense. Amory squeezed my shoulder with a smile and said in a soothing and cajoling tone of voice, "I'll explain everything. I promise. Don't worry, Pascale. You can trust me. I'm your friend, remember? Friends look out for each other." The beautiful blonde, who was shivering as though she were cold, twirled around on the spot and raced off into the living room from which she'd just emerged. "Come along," Amory said with a reassuring smile, pushing me softly. I didn't want to go. This was fast becoming a tangled mess of a situation, but I was stuck for choices now. I desperately wanted to stay away from the woman I knew to be my mate until after Easter for this exact reason. I didn't want her to see me in my shifter form. I had wanted her to see me as a man first, to get to know me before she was subjected to my fluffier self. She'll find me repulsive now. My heart sank low as I followed Amory into the living room like a puppy with its tail between its legs. What was I going to do now? The ex-angel practically pushed me down into an oversized armchair. "Now don't go anywhere, Pascale, you got it? Stay put, I'll be right back." I nodded mutely and swallowed the lump in my throat. The blonde girl, whose name I still didn't know, was perched on the edge of the couch, twisting her hands in her lap. She was too beautiful for words, and my heart ached at the mere sight of her. "I'm Abby, by the way," she said unexpectedly, her voice like a balm for my stressed-out soul. I nodded at her, attempting a smile and failing miserably. "Hi, Abby. I'm the Easter Bunny?" she asked, her lips lifting at the edges. She didn't look afraid or repulsed. In fact, her blue eyes were practically sparkling with mischief and curiosity. "She's not afraid of me. She's okay. My name is Pascale," I finally managed to say. Her lips broke into a full smile, then, "That's Italian for Easter child, right?" I nodded again, my discomfort slowly beginning to melt away in her presence. "Here we go," Amory called out as she carried a laden tray into the living room and set it down on the low wooden coffee table adorned with a vase of fresh flowers. Her colorful mugs were almost comically huge and overflowed with pink and white marshmallows. I couldn't see beneath the delicious-looking fluff, but I had to assume the most decadent hot chocolate one could create was waiting just below the surface. I took the beverage from her gratefully and joked, "You know, I wondered if your sweet tooth would diminish when you moved here. But it seems like it hasn't." My gaze slipped to her visitor, then back to Amory. Amory laughed and sat down on the couch beside Abby, shaking her head. "Oh, don't worry. Abby knows who we are or what we were, Pa. She's an angel agent. Her family helps fallen angels and gets them established in the world safely after they fall. They have a gift, it's quite remarkable." My gaze slid over to Abby, hardly daring to believe my ears. My mate was staring into her hot chocolate, an embarrassed blush coloring her lovely face. Amory continued, "Abby set us up with our jobs and even secured this house for us. She's absolutely amazing. Val and I will be forever grateful." Abby lifted her head and elbowed Amory playfully. "I just helped a little and pointed you in the right direction. You did the rest. After all, it's kind of my job." "You mean your unpaid celestial volunteer work," Amory corrected with a bright grin. "We owe you a lot, Abby. Never forget that." "We certainly won't." I stared at the woman, my mate, a sense of understanding finally dawning on me. "So that's why you can see me? Because you can see angels? It's your gift?" She shrugged, glancing between Amory and I don't know. I mean, I guess. I've never seen anything else, you know, like you before. Just angels." Amory shuffled on the couch. "You're part of the paranormal world, Abby. You have a natural gift. I'd venture to say that if Nicky dropped in, you'd be able to see him too, though most people obviously wouldn't be able to." "Niklaus?" I asked, my brow rising in query. "How's he doing these days?" I hadn't caught up with Nicky in years. We'd all been too busy, which was stupid really considering how small our magical world actually was. "Oh, he's doing great," Amory answered. Val matched him up with this gorgeous witch from Salem. "He's really happy, they make a beautiful couple." "Hang on a second," Abby said, interrupting us. "Are you talking about Santa Claus? You mean to tell me there's a real Santa Claus too?" She stared at us with her mouth agape, her eyes as wide as saucers. I couldn't help but laugh a little. I forget that humans don't know about us. "Oh, we definitely do, as kids at least," Abby replied with a grin of her own. "But us adults have always assumed it was all just fairy tales, myths, you know? For the benefit of the little ones. It adds a bit of magic to life, you know? Like angels and cupids," I said with a smile. She laughed and nodded. "You're right. Of course. How did I not figure that out sooner? If one kind of paranormal exists, the others logically must too." My heart was singing now. I couldn't suppress it. This is too perfect. Outside of the earlier than hoped for timing, this was almost ideal. Abby was human, but already part of our world. Perhaps her adjustment period wouldn't be as terrible as I'd imagined. And maybe mating with her wasn't going to be as difficult as I first thought, either. Abby glanced down at her watch, then jumped up. "Oh my goodness. I'm sorry to cut this short, but I really have to go. But it was so nice to meet you, Pascale. I hope we'll have the chance to talk another time." I quickly set down my drink and hopped to my feet. I extended my arm to shake her hand. I wanted to touch her, if only for a brief moment. "It was great to meet you too, Abby." She hurried forward and put her hand in mine without hesitation. My heart leapt in my chest as I experienced an immediate reaction. My skin tingled all over with what felt like living electricity. Abby made a strange strangled moaning sound. What was that?" Amory asked, stepping forward, her brows furrowed. I knew what it was without question. It was the mating bond. But the women didn't understand, that much was obvious. "Ah? I have to go," Abby said frantically, before ripping her hand from mine and running for the front door. I let her go, even though everything inside my chest lurched and urged me to go after her. I was still staring at the front door long after she'd closed it and fled into the sunny morning. When I finally came back to myself, Amory was staring at me with a huge grin on her face. She looked like the cat that scored the cream. "So, you like my angel agent, huh?" she teased, her eyes sparkling. I coughed to clear the lump in my throat. "Well?" The ex-Cupid arched an eyebrow at me and folded her arms across her chest. "Don't even attempt to lie to me, mister." I sighed, stretching my legs and moving around to shake off some of the nervous energy. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you the truth." Amory chuckled and led me back into the living room. She tucked her legs under her on the couch and picked up her cup of sweet hot chocolate. "Tell me everything." I shook my head, but couldn't help the easy smile that stretched my lips. "You always were incorrigible. You really can't take the Cupid out of the angel." She giggled and made a flippant motion with her hand. "Come on, Pascale. I'm dying to hear this. Spill the tea." "Well, the honest truth is that I was actually coming here to tell you about her," I said. Her eyebrows shot up. "Her? As in Abby?" I nodded, pacing her small living room, unable to remain still. "Yes. I saw her last night in the diner car park." "And? What am I missing here?" she prompted. Were Amory's Cupid skills so long out of practice that she genuinely couldn't tell which way this conversation was headed? I'm pretty damn sure that she's my mate. Amory's big eyes widened even further, and she gasped. "Oh my God. Pascale. Are you sure?" I nodded. "Yeah, I'm pretty positive. All the signs are there. All the feelings too." "But how would that work?" she asked. "I don't know," I said, pacing again. "She's human for one thing. I was planning on staying away from her until after Easter was done with, so that I could shift back to my human form and officially meet her. But that obviously didn't work out. Amory started laughing, then didn't stop. She had to put down her mug of hot chocolate because she was jiggling, and tears were leaking from her eyes. "What's so funny?" I asked, frowning. It took way too long for her to pull herself together, but eventually, she did. "I'm sorry. It's just, you saw her, knew she was the one, tried to escape seeing her again, and found her again within like 6 hours tops. You are definitely meant to be. It's beautiful." "Then why are you laughing?" I asked, still confused by her overzealous response. She blinked and reached for a tissue. "I'm sorry, it's just, I've missed this so much. Fated mates and soulmate loves are the best, and my favorite part is exactly this. You see each other and you just know. And no matter how hard you try and fight it or stay away from each other, you won't be able to. It's kind of insanely perfect." I flomped into the oversized armchair again and sighed. Yeah, well, I'm still in shock myself. I wasn't expecting to find a woman, let alone a fated mate, anytime soon. This has all kind of blindsided me. I'm reeling, Amory. What's up and down? Left or right? I feel like I don't know anymore. The ex-Cupid grinned and reached for her drink, wiggling her hips in a happy little jig as she sat. Enjoy it, my friend. There's truly nothing better. Love is everything. I took a deep breath and tried not to panic. But my life is good, a part of me argued. I had a steady routine, important seasonal responsibilities, and everything worked out just right. How could I not panic? Meeting Abby was going to change everything. Am I really ready for this?
Chapter 4. Abigail. I ran out of Amory's house and into the cool morning air, my heart racing like I was competing in a marathon. What on earth had I just seen? And what in the hell had I just totally fallen head over heels for? I swallowed hard, my mind a whirl. That man I'd just met wasn't a man at all, at least not in the strictest sense of the word. He was a huge male rabbit with silvery gray fur, large fluffy ears and big thumpy feet. He was like some kind of human-rabbit hybrid, perhaps? Or maybe a shifter of sorts? Are they a real thing too? I'd reasoned as much right there in my friend's living room. Anything I'd ever believed to be a fairy tale or myth was probably bloody true. The world was fast unraveling around me. My heart was still pounding, and my mouth had gone dry when I'd addressed him. I likely should have felt scared, disgusted, mortified or something. But my reaction had been something else entirely. One I was almost too afraid to admit to. Pascale had just stood there, frozen and unmoving, and I should have said something nice or comforting. But instead my gaze had refused to stay focused on his face. My eyes had run the length of his body, and noted every difference. And it hadn't stopped. From one feature to another, my gaze continued to flow over his huge pecs, along his muscled arms and back down his strong thighs. And I was almost certain I'd spied a shadow of a raised bulge beneath all that fur. I shivered at the memory as heat flushed through me. How can a rabbit be hot? It made no sense whatsoever. I hurried to my car, opened the door and slammed it shut again. The purr of the engine revving didn't so much as even diminish the roaring sound of the thoughts whirring around in my brain. I must be fucking insane to be thinking about the Easter Bunny in a sexual way. And yet I was. My God, he was hot. But surely he only liked other rabbits of his own kind, or did he somehow change back from time to time? Maybe after Easter was done and dusted. Did he ever become more human? I shook my head as I drove away. I knew nothing about the fairy tale world or the paranormal world as Amory had called it, except for the fact that angels were real and when they fell, I helped them. But I didn't even know that much about angels or heaven or the clouds as Amory called it, I realized when I really thought about it. They didn't tell me, and I didn't ask questions. I'd never wanted to pry. I'd always reasoned that I was human, and it wasn't any of my business. Now, having met Pascale, I wanted to know absolutely everything. Once I got home to my tiny little apartment, I could finally collapse onto my old couch and think about what I'd learned today. The Easter Bunny was real, and he was kind of sexy. When I'd touched his hand, I'd felt a zap, like a pulse of electricity strike me in the strangest way. It was something like a static shock, but so much more intense. My whole body had heated in an instant and my cheeks had flushed. I'd run from Amory's house as fast as my feet could carry me, before I could ask if that happened to everyone, or if he just carried an inordinate amount of static with him in his fur. My heart hurt. I could have stayed longer at Amory's, and potentially gotten to know him a little better. Mondays were my day off after all, but I'd been caught so off guard that I'd bolted like a frightened little bunny at the sound of a gunshot. Hopefully it won't be long before I get to see him again. Chapter 5. Abigail. I drove to the site of the most recent angel sighting. Thankfully, it was only 45 minutes out of town. I'd had far longer drives in my time. I grabbed the angel first aid bag from the passenger seat and read through the messages from my mom. She'd already found the angel somewhere to stay for the week, which was excellent. Sunshine Motel. It wasn't super nice, but it was clean at least, and the clientele weren't too dangerous from what I'd seen in our time utilizing their services. I'd been there and dropped off angels many times before, and the rooms had served their purpose well enough. It was only a temporary measure anyway, just somewhere for newly fallen angels to recover and find their human feet before they began the start of their journeys here on Earth. As I got out of my car and looked around at the pretty park, a familiar car pulled up behind me. "Amory?" I called out, my brow furrowed in intrigue at the bizarre coincidence. The beautiful ex-angel popped out of her car with a vibrant grin. "Hey, Abby. What are you doing here?" I asked her. Amory laughed as if the answer were obvious. "You asked for our help, remember?" I had a vague recollection, but I'd been seriously distracted by other thoughts lately. "Well, I only mentioned it to you and Val in passing, but I didn't think we'd actually put anything into action yet." She beamed as she shut the car door. "Well, Val and I think that you and your family have carried this burden long enough. I contacted your mom and gave her my number, and I've begun contacting other fallen angels so that we can set up a rotation roster as well. You know what they say, many hands make light work." I gaped at her, my heart swelling with sudden emotion. I had no idea. My mother hadn't even mentioned anything. Amory came forward and hugged me tightly. When she pulled back, I had tears pricking at my eyes. Did that mean that my idea had worked? Could it really be that I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life alone because I had no choice but to work in some capacity every waking moment of every day for the rest of my life? "I'll need some training, of course," Amory continued with a smile. "So, any tips and tricks you might have to offer would be greatly appreciated." She waited patiently for me to respond. I had to practically pinch myself to continue. I hadn't realized just how much this would mean to me. For a moment, I felt like I'd been run over by an emotional steam train and left splattered on the tracks. "I can't believe this." "Oh yeah, of course." I snapped myself back to reality with a wobbly smile. "I carry like 5 of these in my car at all times." I held up the angel care package for her to see, which included a basic first aid pack among other things. "And my mom organizes us. She sends us messages of who's fallen and where to find them. And of course, the details of where to take them to rest up during their first week." "Oh yeah. The motel." Amory's eyes lit up with memories. "That was a fun week, actually." She tittered. I chuckled too and shook my head playfully. "I don't want to know, girl. It's been way too long for me on that particular front." With our mission in mind, together, we began walking across the manicured park. I scanned the area, looking around for the telltale signs that the angel was nearby. "You know, Pascale was very interested in you yesterday," Amory mentioned casually as she walked along beside me. I twisted around to look straight at Amory, my insides twisting with nerves and desire. "Holy shit. She can't mean." "What do you mean?" I asked, before clearing my throat and looking ahead. She crossed her arms over her chest and stared back at me, one eyebrow cocked humorously. "You know exactly what I bloody well mean," she said. "No, I don't," I reassured her, swallowing against the thick feeling in my throat. "Do you mean because I'm human and could see him?" He did seem pretty upset by that. She cackled like I'd lost my marbles. "He wasn't upset at all, Abby. He just couldn't quite handle how attracted to you he was." My face immediately burned with a hot blush, and at that moment I felt the angel moving about, rather than saw them. I turned back around, and began to hurry in the direction that my senses were guiding me. And that's when I saw him, sitting in the dirt and looking about absently like he'd just been conked on the head with a cast-iron frying pan. "Danielle," I called out, remembering the name mentioned in my messages as I slowed my pace, so he wasn't frightened of our unexpected approach. The angel's gaze came up and met mine, then he looked to my left, his eyes lighting up with immediate recognition. "Amory," he breathed. My angel friend walked around me, her smile bright. "Danielle," she answered. "It's wonderful to see you again, my friend." She reached out a hand to the fallen angel and helped him to his feet. "Come meet Abby," she invited, encouraging Danielle to take a wobbly step closer. I put my hand out to him and grabbed his arm before he stumbled. "Just be careful," I warned him gently. "Without your wings, it will take you a few hours to get used to how it feels to walk again. Your balance is all off at the moment." Amory stood on his other side, offering her support, and snorted. "Hours?" It was more like a few weeks. Together, we helped Danielle into my car, gave him a whole lot of sugar and water, and drove him to the Sunshine Motel. He didn't fall with anyone, which was relatively unusual in my experience. But I could sense that he was ready for his life to begin, to find love in the human realm. He wanted more out of life than service, which I could absolutely relate to. And the irony of that fact wasn't lost on me either. "We'll be in touch in a few days, once we get a house sorted for you," I told him. Amory perked her head up from investigating the mini fridge. "Actually, Val and I were thinking we would offer our spare room to the next angel for a few months, if that's okay. That way we can help Danielle learn the ropes of the human world much faster, and the motel option is still available for another angel if it's needed." My mouth fell open. Not only did that sound wonderful, but their offer would take a lot of the financial strain off my family in the long term. Constantly paying for weeks in a motel did not come cheap. "That would be so great, Amory. But we better check in with my mom, just in case. She might already have things rolling on her end." Danielle collapsed onto the bed. "I feel like I've been hit by a truck." I searched in the angel bag I'd given to him for Advil. "Take a few of these with water," I advised. "They'll help ease the pain. And for now, just get as much rest as you can, really. There's not much more to do for the next few days, but hang in there. We'll be back sooner if every works out with the change of accommodation." We made sure Danielle was set up and had everything he needed before heading out. It felt a little strange to leave someone alone with no one else, but that was the nature of choosing to fall alone. I could only hope Amory's friend found someone special to spend his new human life with. After all the love the Cupids blessed the world with, they deserve to experience it for themselves. Amory and I stopped by our cars to chat. I wasn't sure how to find the right words, but I forced myself to try. "I need to thank you," I said, "for offering to help both financially and time-wise." She grinned at me. "I think all of us fallen angels should pay back the money spent on us. On the motel's rent and food, kind of like some sort of payback loan situation. Or maybe even a pay-it-forward for the next angel system, so you and your family can stop floating us." I laughed at her language. "You're really getting used to the lingo, aren't you?" It made my heart melt. She shrugged. "I'm being deadly serious, Abby. If all the angels that you've helped paid you back for even just their setup costs, what would that do for your family?" I gulped at the mere thought, and my mind spun like a merry-go-round gone wild. My mom could probably pay off her mortgage, if I'm being honest. We'd always lived on very little, prioritizing helping the angels over ourselves. It was our family's calling, after all. But it would be so incredible if my parents could finally settle down in peace, especially financially speaking. It would blow their minds to see that happiness and generosity returned to them. Amory nodded once. Then I'm going to make sure it happens. I'm sure none of the angels that you've helped have any real idea that you put your own money into setting us up. If they did, I have absolutely no doubt they would have paid you back long ago. They have good hearts, and we all appreciate what you've given up for us. I opened my car door and fiddled with my keys. How did you work it out, Amory? I asked. She looked at me with a shrewd look in her eye. I put things together pretty quickly. Once we had to start paying our rent and bills, I immediately wondered who paid for that first month. Then I asked your mom and Billy told me the truth. I groaned. Of course he did. Hey, don't be mad at him. He told me the truth and I'm grateful. We're all so very grateful for everything, Abby, like I said. None of us would have this chance at life if it weren't for your family. I can't imagine what falling would be like, with the kind of support you offer as angel agents. It would be terrifying, quite frankly. I honestly don't want to even think about it. The ex-Cupid shuddered, before regaining her composure. I leaned against the car, a smile tweaking my lips. You're so welcome. I'd never want to let angels suffer. I'll always help, as long as I'm needed, but your offer to set up a network team of angel rescuers is incredible beyond words. It means I might be able to actually live my life a little. Find my own happiness, you know. I went to get back to the driver's side, but Amory stopped me. Speaking of which, she started. How would you feel about me setting up a date or something, for you and Pascale? My jaw dropped as I stared at her, my heart galloping. Did she just offer to Cupid me? That is, unless the rabbit thing bothers you, she asked, tilting her head to the side in question. I can understand if it does. Oh God, no. It's not that. I rushed to say, though when I paused to think about it, I definitely had some questions. But he is technically another species, right? I mean, are we even allowed to date? I asked. I couldn't believe I was even entertaining this, and wasn't just jumping into my car and hitting the gas. The Easter Bunny doesn't want to date me, does he? That just sounds insane. Amory gave me a placating smile, then slapped herself on the forehead. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I just realized you don't even know that he's a shifter, do you? I forget about that sometimes too. A shifter. I'd heard of them in fairy tales, of course, and I'd had my suspicions, but to know they were real was something else entirely. I glanced around nervously. Surely no one could hear us in this empty car park, but I was paranoid anyway. He's a shifter, Amory explained. As in, he's human most the time. Well, he looks like one anyway. He's obviously paranormal, or a magical, as some of us say. And he can shift or change into that massive bunny form anytime he likes. So he can control it? I asked, frowning. Like putting on a suit or something? I was struggling to wrap my head around quite how that worked in practice. Usually, sort of. But around Easter time he stays in bunny form constantly. He sort of doesn't have a choice on that front. The pull of the season and the stresses on him are obscenely strong at this time of year. I stared at her with a newfound respect and smiled. You really know a lot more than me, don't you? She chuckled loudly. Well, I do have a few unfair advantages there. One being that I'm over 200 years old, so I may have picked up a few things over the course of my angelic life. Don't worry, in time you'll learn. I sighed, sobering once more. So, what do I do, Amory? About Pascale, you mean? She asked, raising an eyebrow again. I nodded and chewed on my lower lip, so as not to reveal too much about the way I felt. Amory grinned at me, as though she knew what was going on in my head in real time. You really like him, don't you, Abby? I don't know him, I defended, licking my lips and averting my gaze. She arched her other eyebrow at me. But you want him anyway, right? Don't put it like that, I said, staring down at my feet as I scuffed my shoes on the roadside. "Don't be embarrassed," she said quickly. "It's normal to want to connect with and love another being. It's what makes life beautiful." That was true. "Okay, yeah, but..." "Not buts," Amory interrupted me. "I'll contact Pascale and I'll see what I can tee up. He doesn't have a cell phone, but the shifters all communicate with one another, and the Easter shifters have an internal telephone system, I think. I might be able to get a hold of their number." "Where does he live?" I asked, hoping it wasn't somewhere as bogus as the North Pole. "Not far from here actually," she said, not meeting my gaze. "Amory," I said her name sternly, forcing her to look at me. "Where does he live, exactly?" You know, where most rabbits live," she answered with a hesitant smile. "In a burrow of sorts. Underground. All nice and cozy." I gulped. Underground? I didn't like the sound of that one bit. Amory suggested it was cozy, but all I could think of was dirt and darkness. "I've never been," Amory rushed to add. But the way Pascale explained it to me, the ground seemed very similar to our barracks in the clouds. Lots of bedrooms, all connected by a long hallway. There's working rooms, eating halls, space to socialize, etc. "And he lives there all year round?" I asked, my stomach twisting in knots. "Even in human form? If that's the way to say it?" I was still coming to grips with the terminology. She nodded. "Yeah, I think so. But hey, I've been out of touch with Pascale for a while, so that's probably a question you could ask him. So, how about it? Can I set you two up? I've kind of missed the art of being a cupid." I shook my head with a wry smile. "I knew it. You want to cupid me?" I accused. "Oh please," Amory begged, putting her palms together in a prayer sort of stance. "Just one lunch or whatever. If it doesn't work out, at least you'd have learned something special about the paranormal world. No harm, no foul." I took my time thinking about her question. Instinctually, I knew I shouldn't do it. My gut twisted with something akin to worry and fear. But at the same time my breath caught in my throat, and I had to swallow hard to deal with the feelings that kept surging up and threatening to drown me like waves at sea. "It's just lunch," Amory said again, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "You said you were okay with the rabbit thing, right?" I nodded, my mind wandering hopelessly back to my dreams. My cheeks blazed with heat, and I felt an ache blossoming downstairs all over again. "Yeah. I am." "Good. Then I'll set something up and call you, okay?" She barely let me nod in agreement before sliding into her new little car and zipping off, just your everyday run-of-the-mill ex-angel on a mission. I watched her disappear into the distance and shook my head. That woman is a force to be reckoned with. Upon realizing that I was actually going on a date with the Easter Bunny, whether I liked it or not, happiness filled me up inside, desperate to explode like a shaken can of pop. With a grin on my face, I slid into my own car, laughing at the absurdity of it all. With my heart bouncing in my chest and my mood soaring above the clouds, higher than any angel ever could, I drove back home, singing along to my radio at the top of my lungs.
Chapter 6. Pascale. I'd totally forgotten that I even had a telephone in the burrow until the shrill sound of the old thing in my office rung, making my ears hurt. No one ever called that line, so this was a strange occurrence to say the least. It rang again and again, and I groaned, reaching for the silly contraption. The ringing finally stopped when I picked up the receiver and held the ancient corded device to my oversensitive ear. "Hello? Hey Pa. It's Amory, how are you?" I frowned at the sound of the familiar voice practically singing across the line, perplexed as all fuck. I'm okay. Is everything all right with you and Val?" I racked my mind trying to think of a reason as to why the ex-Cupid might want to call me. This phone had been installed for real emergencies only. "Oh yes, we're fine," she reassured me brightly. "But we really need to get you a cell phone, Pascale. It's a necessity in this modern age, and it'd make this a whole lot easier." Where is this going?" Why?" I asked, dumbfounded by the very idea that someone would want or need to be able to communicate with me at any time of the day or night. Had people forgotten the concept of peace and quiet or privacy? So that we can contact you when we need you, silly, she exclaimed through the phone, sounding positively exasperated by my line of questioning. Do you have any idea how many people I've had to call before I could even get this number? It was insane. Let's just leave it at that. I would assume a lot. It's not like it was a readily available number. It was relegated to magical business only. Speaking of which, how did you get this number, Angel? I'd like to know who had our emergency number and would give it out when asked. I had no idea who would betray the trust of our secrecy so readily. That's not the point, Pascale, she said, still sounding too excited for this early in the morning. I rubbed my head with my fingers, where pain pounded behind my temples. Then what is the point, Angel? Something awesome, she declared. Can you guess what it is? She paused, I assumed for effect, then continued, the words practically spilling out of her in a torrent. Abby wants a date with you. So I told her I'd set up a lunch between you both ASAP. So, are you free today? My jaw dropped and it began to spin. She what? My ribs squeezed tight around my heart, and suddenly the headache that had been bothering me didn't matter anymore. I'd been going crazy the last few days staying away from my mate. I was working my tail off with my eyes fixed on the prize. Easter. After that, I could do what I wanted to do, but not yet. I must focus. She wants to meet you for a date, and I recommended lunch, Amory babbled on, oblivious to my situation. I think she feels the mating call, even if she doesn't know how to identify it yet. But the great thing is, she's most definitely into you. Isn't that great? I coughed to clear my throat and bought myself a second to think, then swallowed hard. Look, Amory, I appreciate your help, but I can't date anyone right now. We're just 2 weeks out from Easter Sunday. I reasoned. There's a lot on the line. And, she said, sounding annoyed. You're letting something like that get in the way of claiming your fated mate. Are you for real right now, Pa? I closed my eyes and damned myself for telling Amory the truth about Abby being my mate. Amory. I can't shift back at the moment. At all. If I'm going to pursue Abby, and I definitely was going to, then I need to be a man. You're a man, Pa. You're a shifter, and she needs to see and appreciate you in both forms, don't you think? If you're going to be together forever, she needs to get to know all of you. Love knows no boundaries, no shame or hate. Love is everything you could ever dream of, and so much. Trust me, okay? Ex-Cupid and all that. I couldn't deny the truth of her words, but that didn't mean that I agreed with her. If I'd had my way, Abby would have met me in my human form first, and not seen my rabbit for as long as possible. It would have been different if she was a shifter herself, or part of the paranormal world more directly, but she wasn't. She was human, albeit with a gift, and I needed to connect with her in that way. I took a deep breath and tried to explain to Amory how I felt. But if I wait until after Easter Sunday, then I'll have a choice when and if I shift. Okay. If that's what you think is best, then that's fine, I guess. There was a long, dramatic, and silent pause. Damn it. What is it, Amory? I pressed. I just agreed with you, she said. It's fine. Oh, come on. What now? The girl was holding back on me, and it was as obvious as the day was long. I wasn't an idiot, and I certainly wasn't born yesterday. Well, Val and I, and all the other ex-angels, have decided to help out in a big way with the rescuing angel services. That's smart, I said, not understanding what that had to do with me or my present dating predicament. Yeah, thanks, she said. But that means that Abby and her family don't have half the reasons they used to stick around here anymore. They'll have money for the first time in a long time, because I'm encouraging all the angels who've been buoyed by them over the past 50 years to pay them back. It'll be wonderful for them to have that kind of financial freedom, don't you agree? My heart pounded inside my chest, slow and too hard. I could scarcely catch my breath. There was a worrisome inference to Amory's words, and I wasn't liking it one bit. "What are you trying to say, Abby?" "I'm saying," she stopped to sigh loudly, "that Abby's cousin Billy told us that Abby's always wanted to travel the world, but has never been able to even take a decent vacation." She stopped, and I knew it was to let me digest that information. I tried to rationalize my choice. "It's only a few weeks, Amory. I can wait a few weeks to date her. It will be fine." My mate, just thinking about her again hurt. Damn, I miss her so much and I hardly even know her. I'd barely slept at all last night from all the thinking about her, and fantasizing about what I'd do to her when I finally got my human body back. "Only a few weeks?" Abby's snort was far from elegant. "Sure thing, Pascale. Good luck with that." "What's that supposed to mean?" I snapped back, as anger swirled in my gut at her obvious disdain for my decision. "Honestly, don't worry about it. I'll just let Abby know that you're not interested in dating her, and that I was wrong about you. I guess my Cupid radar isn't what it used to be." "For fuck's sake. That's not fair, Amory. I don't have a damn choice." "Yes? Yes you do," she fired back. "And if you think you can stay away from your fated mate for 2 whole weeks, you're bloody well delusional. And if you also think you're going to be okay once Abby takes off traveling the world and meets someone else, you've got another thing coming, bunny boy." "She won't meet another man," I growled back at the ex-angel as my irritation grew. "I'm the one she's meant to be with." Amory's tinkling laugh sounded at the end of the line, and it grated on my nerves. "Well, enjoy your work, Pascale. Chocolate and all that is obviously super important. You can't say I didn't try. I mean, why should you listen to someone who was once a Cupid? It's not like I know anything at all about love." I opened my mouth to say something back, but the phone clicked and a bleak, stagnant silence followed. She didn't just hang up on me. Words I wanted to give voice to froze in my mind. "Hello?" I called desperately into the phone. "Hello, Amory." But there was no one there. She was gone. And worse still, she was going to tell my fated mate I wasn't interested in her. My world came crashing down as I slammed the receiver back into its cradle, overwhelmed and frustrated. "Fuck!" I yelled at the top of my lungs into the empty room. A nearby assistant opened the door and stuck her head into my office. "Hey Eb. Are you okay?" she asked, obviously having heard me shouting. I grabbed my ears and squeezed tight, a growl of anger rolling through my vocal cords as I tried desperately to contain my rage. Her eyes widened, then she turned tail and ran, closing the door behind her. "Fuck!" I collapsed into the chair, my head spinning. Amory had just poked a sore spot that was simply impossible for me to ignore. I didn't have time to pursue Abby 2 weeks out from Easter, it was just too much. There were still a million things left to do. It was the most stressful and hectic time of year for rabbit shifters. And she wasn't being fucking fair at all. Chocolate and all that? She knew it was so much more. How dare she? And aside from all that, I didn't want to date Abigail when I couldn't get naked and fuck her with my human body. But could I really wait until after Easter and risk losing Abby to her vacation plans? Surely she won't find a lover in that time. That wasn't going to happen, I consoled myself. But my stomach twisted at the thought and I reached up and squeezed my ears again. I could tear my fur out right now. Most of my life I'd always been grateful for my magical lineage, for my rabbit-shifting powers and my calling as the Easter Bunny. It brought happiness, hope, and chocolate treats to so many children, but in this moment, it really felt like everything sucked. Hard. And though I was loath to admit it, Amory had me second-guessing my own damn plans, and more than anything, that was the cherry on the cake of a very shitty day.
Chapter 7. Abigail. Thanks to Amory, within days of agreeing to accept the angel's help, my bank account was flooded with transactions. I'd never in my whole life seen so much money under balance. "I can't believe it," I breathed in awe, staring down at my banking app on my cell phone. Billy's chuckle was full of true happiness, and it was a breath of fresh air to hear. So it turns out that helping those angels out all these years was the best savings account of all time. It seems kindness really does pay, he joked. The first thing I'm doing is buying a house and making myself comfortable. How about you, Abby? I dragged my eyes away from the shocking number of zeros in my account and glanced up to meet his gaze, utterly overwhelmed. I don't really know. I've never imagined I'd find myself in a situation like this. You don't? Billy said, taking a huge slurp of his chocolate malt milkshake. I would have thought you'd have a proverbial list of things you'd want to buy, Coos. Hey Billy, a pretty woman with a big smile said, appearing by our booth. She touched my cousin's shoulder, then continued over to the diner's counter with a sultry backward glance over her shoulder. Billy nodded, then his cheeks blossomed a soft shade of red. I forced my brain back to the present and grinned at my cousin, a burst of happiness exploding inside of me for him. So, you're actually going after Shelley now? I asked with a smile. It's about damn time. He didn't even answer, he just winked and slid out of the booth before swaggering after Shelley to the counter. I sighed and reached for a French fry and turned inward once more. Billy's innocent question had only brought something to the surface that I'd long since buried. My whole adult life I'd put my own dreams on hold for the sake of the angels. It would have been selfish of me to go off to Paris and leave my parents and other cousins to look after all the fallen angels, especially when it was my calling too, just as much as it was theirs. Not only that, but it had always seemed unwise to spend the only meager saving I had on a holiday. Experiences were nice, but when emergencies might crop up, it was better to save those funds for a rainy day. But now, holy shit! I can actually think about traveling. Or maybe even going to business college. My mind spun with the possibilities. They were practically endless. It was like a whole new world had opened to me. It was as if a magical door had appeared, and behind it were all of my dreams. I just had to find the courage to step through. I shook my head to clear my thoughts. I didn't want to be swept away by some pie-in-the-sky dream. And I certainly didn't want to be like those idiot lottery winners who blew all their money and were left with nothing. I definitely wanted some security, sure, but the rest of it? I just don't know. My cell phone rang, inviting a welcome distraction from my conundrum. I glanced down at the screen and smiled. It was Amory. I could use a real friend right about now. Hey, Amory. How are you? I answered. Hey, sweetie. The ex-angel sang at me. I'm great. How are you doing? I'm good, I answered automatically, though I wasn't sure if I actually was. But the habit of being polite was so ingrained in me that it didn't matter. What's up? I asked. I've had a bit of a weird realization. My hair. I think it needs a cut. I paused for a moment, then began to chuckle. You've never had a haircut before? Of course she hasn't. She's an angel. She's used to nothing ever changing. She huffed. No. My hair has remained the same length ever since I reached maturity, but now it's changing and I'm not sure I like it. I smiled to myself. It was such a simple thing to take for granted. The angel was human now, which meant she had to face very human problems, such as hunger, thirst, attending to her ablutions and, of course, haircuts. And colors. I wonder if she'll let me play a little. I lifted my wrist and checked my watch. I can come by this evening if that suits you? Possibly around like 7 p.m.? Is that okay? Oh yes please. At my house? Amory asked. Or should I come to you? I don't mind either way. No, I assured her. I can come to you, it's no trouble. Sliding out of the booth, I added. I'd like to see Valentine too anyway, it's been ages. It'd be nice to catch up and have a chat. Okay. Sounds great, Abby, she said. I'll have hot chocolate ready to go. I'll see you soon. After Amory hung up, I filled my day with 2 other clients and some grocery shopping. It was beginning to irk me that the promise of the future wasn't as inviting as it perhaps should have been, and I could only put that down to one thing. Pascale. Meeting the Easter Bunny, the literal Eb, had been strangely life-changing for me. I wasn't too sure as to the full extent of my feelings just yet, but I had an inkling that Amory was going to help me out there. The meddling Cupid just couldn't help herself. She missed her original calling, and was eager to help love blossom here on Earth. I arrived at Amory and Valentine's house at 5 minutes to 7, with my full hairdressing suitcase and a bag. I had no idea what Amory was going to opt for, so I came fully equipped. She could want a simple trim as easily as she could want to try an entirely new look and style. When I opened the car door, I couldn't help but smile as I watched the setting sun falling beneath the horizon behind Amory's house. It cast magnificent shades of pink and purple over the sky, and caused a tingle of happiness to burst to life in my heart. The front door opened as I was pulling the suitcases out of my trunk. "Abby!" Val called from the landing, waving. I shut the trunk lid and walked toward him. "Hey Val." His grin was huge as he embraced me quickly, then went about grabbing my bag and case for me. "You look like you're moving in with all this," he joked. I laughed softly. "There probably isn't any room, is there? Amory said you guys were taking the latest fallen angel into your home to help teach them the ropes of the world." Val pushed open the front door and I followed him inside. I loved their home. It was honestly way too big for them, but it was light and bright and homey. Plus, with double incomes now, they could afford it. And who knew what the future held for them? Maybe they'd fill their house with the pitter-patter of tiny feet before long. "Well, actually we got them an apartment," Val explained as he shut the door. "Because it wasn't a single angel, a couple fell together, so we thought more space would be better for them. That, and they'd likely appreciate the privacy." I stared at Val, immediately struck by his kindness and generosity. "That's amazing." "Oh, it's nothing," he said, brushing off my words and walking through the living room toward the kitchen. "And how about Danielle?" I asked. "We put him up in a motel, but I haven't heard any more about him since. I know he was one of Amory's good friends." Val grinned over his shoulder. "We were going to offer him the spare room, but we found a better option. He's living with another single male angel in the next town over. We thought he might feel a little weird here with us. Over there he's got his own space and is free to live the bachelor life until he finds the one." I hurried after Val. "Wow. You guys have really jumped headlong into this whole endeavor. I'm so glad to hear it's working out." The aroma of a delicious savory meal wafted through the house, and we found Amory in the kitchen, serving up overly generous bowls of a rich, creamy pasta. "Oh, haven't you guys eaten dinner yet?" I asked, my own stomach growling from my lack of adherence to regular mealtimes. Amory grinned at me. "Nope, and neither have you, I'll bet. So, let's have some food together, and then you can convince me to do something crazy with my hair." "No." Val cried out dramatically, grabbing for his wife's hair and tangling his fingers in her golden curls. "I love it long, babe." Amory rolled her eyes. "I just thought it might be time for a change. Let's see what Abby says, huh?" We all sat down at their modern square glass table, our steaming bowls of pasta and decadent sauce in front of us. Amory and Val said a short grace for our meal, then we dug in. I moaned when the first bite hit my tongue in an explosion of flavor. It was glorious. "Holy wow. Amory, yum. This is seriously amazing." She grinned at me and wiggled triumphantly in her seat. "I'm enjoying trying new recipes. Cooking is a new hobby of mine." I went on to ask her about their eating habits in heaven, and we chatted for a while. I was certainly glad I didn't have to sustain purely on sweets. They were delicious, but there was absolutely such a thing as too much of a good thing. And besides, I couldn't give up pasta to save my life. Amory knew it was a weakness of mine. Cheeky wench. Clearing his throat, Val turned to me and captured my attention. "So, I heard you met EB here the other day, is that right?" he asked. I stared down at my bowl, focusing on twirling my fork to secure the pasta. Yeah, I did. There was a strange silence that fell over the table, and when I glanced up, both Amory and Val were staring at me. What? I asked with a grimace. Aren't you going to say anything else? Amory pressed, her eyebrows dancing. I thought you'd be keen to see him again. I took my time chewing my next bite, then forced myself to shrug with as much nonchalance as I could muster. Well, you said you'd set something up, so I hadn't really thought about it much since then. You know, work and everything. It keeps me busy. Liar. Amory began toying with her food, her sparkling blue eyes alight with meddlesome mischief. Well, I just happened to speak with Pascale the other day. She paused, as if waiting for a reaction. I finally groaned. Yeah, and? I popped another forkful of deliciousness into my mouth and chewed. He said he's too busy over the next few weeks to tee anything up, it being Easter and all. Easter? I repeated, forcing myself to swallow the pasta still in my mouth, even though my throat was thick with an emotion that was hard to describe. That's not far, I suppose, I answered casually, taking a long sip of water. And it wasn't. What was a few weeks, really? We all had lives, and I could only imagine the season must be chaotic for him. I mean, he is the Easter Bunny. Amory flicked her long blonde hair over shoulder. I told Pascale that since you're newly cashed up, you might end up traveling a bit. Yeah, that was always the plan, I managed to say, thank you for that, by the way. For everything you've done for my family. I really can't tell you what it means to me and my cousin. Amory waved her hand and picked up her own drink. Don't be silly. It's a crime you weren't paid back years ago. But back to Pascale and what I told him. Are you actually planning on traveling now that you finally can? I pressed my lips together, trying to think about the right thing to say next. It had always been my dream to take off around America, then go on to Europe maybe. Travel around, working for cash, sleeping in backpackers' hostels and seeing the most beautiful places in the world. Luxury hotels weren't my thing. If I was going to commit to an adventure, I wanted to be on the ground, experiencing real culture and beauty firsthand. Yeah, maybe, I said. Honestly, I don't have any firm plans just yet. I'm still reeling. I can't believe the opportunity even exists, let alone the fact I could seize it. It seems too good to be true in a lot of ways. Amory leaned forward over the table. Well, I think you should start making plans. Take action. Seize your dreams. Claim the life you want. You certainly deserve it, Abby. You've done so much for so many, I think it's your time to shine. I smiled at her, my heart swelling at her sentiments. She made it all sound so simple. But I still wasn't sure what I wanted, and I was tying myself in knots over it. I felt plagued by indecision, and I hated it. Yeah, you're right. I'll have to give it some serious thought. But for now, since I'm here to do your hair tonight, should we talk about colors maybe? I raised my eyebrows at her, then at Val. If I could dodge the whole Pascale and big life decisions topic for the rest of the night, I certainly intended to. I'm just a big damn pile of I don't know. It was as maddening as it was frustrating, and I just wanted to focus on something down to earth, something simple that I loved, like hair. Those heavy thoughts weren't going anywhere, anytime soon anyway. I might as well just enjoy the time with my friends. Amory laughed at the look of sheer shock on Val's face as his eyes widened mid-chew. With a smile of my own, I reached for my suitcase so that I could show her my color books. Gorgeous virgin blonde hair like Amory's would absorb any color she wanted. And I was ready to play.
Chapter 8. Pascale. Amory's phone call had really put the wind up me. I felt like a cat dancing on a hot tin roof. I felt agitated, I couldn't think straight, and I certainly couldn't work. The need to see Abby grew with every passing minute, and was driving me to absolute distraction. And I might have been able to wait until after Easter, if that bloody ex-Cupid hadn't put it in my head that Abby was leaving at the first given opportunity, now that she had the means. When everyone else was in bed, I went out, making myself invisible to the world, but dressing in my traditional hoodie and jeans disguise, just in case. With determination, I made my way to Amory's house, getting more annoyed and agitated with every hop. I didn't know where Abby lived, or I probably would have gone past her place, just to reassure myself that she was still around. What would I do if she headed off traveling? Would I be able to find her? We were fated mates. Surely it couldn't be too hard to track her down. Could it? Fear and anger warred with each other, until I finally reached Amory's and Val's house. I stopped short, my eyes wide as I stared at the small red car parked in the drive. That was Amory's car. I remembered it from the last time I saw her, when we briefly sat down to talk over those ridiculously fluffy hot chocolates of Amory's. Is she here? My heart began to pound uncomfortably in my chest, and I glanced back down the street in the direction I'd just come. She was still here in town. She hadn't gone anywhere. She was still safely mine. I could hop on back to my burrow and feel satisfied, or at least somewhat relieved, now. Couldn't I? My feet seemed to have a mind of their own as they propelled me toward the front door. Then, like I was on some kind of autopilot, I lifted my arm and knocked twice. Now I'm not even able to control my hands. Great. The door opened and Valentine stood on the other side, a slow smile stretching his lips. Hey Eb. Long time no see. I stepped forward and shook the hand of the fallen angel I'd known for decades, long before his fall. It's good to see you, Val, I managed. Val shut the door behind me and extended his arm in invitation. I glanced around, looking for any sign that they were hiding the human I wanted so desperately to see. Val crossed his arms over his chest and raised an eyebrow at me, a knowing look in his eye. Looking for someone? I opened my mouth to retort, but then I heard it and froze. That musical laugh, the one that belonged to my beautiful mate. I turned toward the kitchen, heart still thumping away. Are they? I pointed at the closed door. Val nodded. Yep. They sure are. Are you unable to shift out of full bunny mode at the moment? He asked. Unfortunately, I said, all the while my legs further proved the point by doing that thing where they moved without my permission. Like I really was no more than a stupid twitchy bunny, and not a man in his own right. I sighed with deep-seated frustration and hung my head in defeat. God, this is humiliating. I just want to be able to shift already. Val grimaced in empathy and understanding as he trailed behind me, then stepped around my large furry form as I reached for the door. Allow me, he offered. The ex-angel pushed the door wide open to reveal an image straight out of a dream. My mate had her head thrown back as she laughed, her delight and joy as clear as day. Her beautiful long blonde hair was piled on top of her head in a messy bun, and a smudge of hot pink color was smeared across her cheek. She had a brush and a pair of scissors in hand, and Amory was sitting on a chair in front of her wearing a black nylon cape, her hair wet and wavy. Val cleared his throat officiously, interrupting the moment and shattering the dreamlike quality of my vision. Both women turned toward me. Pascale. Abby gulped, her expression changing from elation to worry faster than I could blink. Hey EB. Amory grinned at me from her seat while I struggled to speak. Fancy seeing you out of your burrow. I thought you'd be holed up there for the next few weeks. Abby put her scissors down and busied herself with picking up a flashy black hair dryer. Turning it on low, she started waving it over Amory's hair, keeping her gaze fixed on her task. Ah no. I wanted to come by and say hi, I managed to say, though everything inside of me was literally struggling to function properly. My heart was pounding too hard, and my throat felt thick and hot, like I'd swallowed a cupful of pan-fresh liquid caramel. I could barely speak, and I found myself wanting nothing more than to reach over and grab Abby and pull her into my arms. Well, hi, Amory said, waving at me and grinning like the cat who'd found a bowl of cream. I did my best not to glare at her, but it was an exercise in futility. Fucking hell. Arrogant little Cupid. She knew I wouldn't be able to stay away from Abby. I kind of need to finish drying her hair, Abby said suddenly, waving her hand at Amory's new do. Are you going to stick around for a while? She asked. My mind whirled and my stomach burst into a storm of chaotic butterflies, but I nodded regardless. Yeah. I stumbled, lost for words. Val opened the fridge, grabbed a couple of beers, then rejoined me. All right, girls. Pascale and I will have a beer in the lounge. You two take your time. Thanks, sweetheart. Amory said with a broad grin. Val handed me my beer and walked back to the lounge. I gripped the cold bottle and stood transfixed, just staring at Abby as she worked. Damn, she is beautiful. Come on, man. Val called. Abby gave me an apologetic smile, then turned the hairdryer on to full strength to get the job done. The kitchen was filled with noise and the spell was broken. Abby was working and focusing, and I had to get out. I turned and went to the lounge, falling into the huge sectional with the beer still clasped firmly in my furry hand. Val stared at me with a knowing smirk. What? I demanded, my tone a little grouchier than I would have liked as I took a swig of my beer. The ex-angel laughed softly. Oh mate, you got it bad. I groaned and took another drink. Boy, did I need some liquid courage. Yeah, of course I do, I admitted without preamble. She's my mate, I know that. But I'm in freaking bunny mode. I can't even kiss her. I took another few gulps of beer and sighed. What the hell am I even doing here? Valentine shifted on the couch and shrugged casually. I think you might need to stress a little less, Eb. If she's truly your mate, won't you be together forever? I frowned at him. You do know the definition of a fated mate, right? Val just laughed. Humor me here. If she's your ideal match, your forever girl, then won't she have to deal with bunny mode every year? Forever? He asked, soundly far too reasonable. I opened my mouth to speak, then stopped. Aw yeah. But I didn't dare say it out loud. I didn't want to give these bloody cupids any more satisfaction that their gifts were as on par as ever. Instead I said, in a year she'll love me enough to look past all this, but right now, she doesn't. All she can see is the fur and the ears and the fucking tail. Dear God. It's a damn miracle she hasn't run for the hills already. Val's lips quivered with a very obvious and poorly suppressed laugh. I knew my fluffy tail was hilarious to most people, but to me it was the same as having a bad haircut, you just had to wait for it to grow out. And in my case, I just needed to wait for it to stop being Easter so I could shift back. I wasn't ashamed of my tail or being a rabbit shifter, but other magicals and paranormals just didn't quite get it. And don't get me wrong, I had a healthy sense of humor about it, you had to, but sometimes it just got too much. Especially at this time of year. The ex-Cupid sighed heavily. Pascale, if you want my honest opinion, you're being a bit of an idiot. I scoffed at him and looked away. I probably was, but I couldn't see another option at this point. I was stressed out at work, utterly distracted by having found my fated mate, and it was getting seriously hard to suppress my insanely high sex drive. To say I was frustrated and strung out would be the understatement of the year. Slamming down my beer, I tried to stop the heavy spiral of negative thoughts from dragging me down along with them. Keep it together, Eb. You're stronger than this. When the hairdryer sounds finally stopped, the door to the kitchen flew open and Amory flounced out, spinning and flicking her now rainbow hair about in a flurry of color. Valentine got to his feet, his eyes wide with surprise, but his lips curved into a broad smile. You look gorgeous. I love it, he praised. Amory rewarded his compliment with a huge hug. Thanks, babe. I love it too. Abby was grinning from behind them as she packed up her supplies into a large suitcase. It's only semi-permanent, so it'll wash out and fade into a pastel ombre over time. But I think it's the perfect Easter hair. Bright, fun, and fresh. Amory did look great, I had to admit. My mate had done an incredible job and was clearly very talented. But it was Abby that I wanted to gobble up. Are you heading home then, Abby? I asked her as casually as I could, getting quickly to my feet. Abby nodded, zipping up her suitcase and grabbing for the big trolley handle to wheel it out. Yeah, it's pretty late and I have work tomorrow. So I better get going. She walked toward me, slinging the other bag she'd brought over her shoulder. "I'll walk you out," I said, not waiting for her to answer. I just grabbed the handle on her suitcase from her, my furry fingers brushing hers in the exchange, before I waved to my angel friends. "See you guys later." There were some soft murmurings behind me, but I didn't bother to turn around or look back. I just opened the front door and walked the suitcase over to Abby's little red car, then stood by and waited for her to unlock the car and pack her things. I wanted to help, but I didn't want to overstep so early on in our relationship, so just waited patiently, my heart thumping the whole time. I got the feeling very quickly that Abby was used to being an independent woman, and I had no intention of insinuating otherwise by putting the macho moves on too soon. She took a few minutes sorting it all out, but then she came around to the front of the car, slamming the trunk on her way around. "Thanks for helping me," she said. There was no one else around now, and yet I felt unbelievably nervous. She stepped up to me, reaching for the car door handle. "Do you need a lift back to your house?" she asked. I gulped back my instant reaction, which was to tell her exactly what I wanted to do with her back at my burrow. "No, thank you. It's fine. I can run." Abby's green eyes were incredibly beautiful, and there was only a scant foot between us now. My sensitive nose could already smell her divine feminine musk, and my hands were just aching to reach out and grab her. In the interest of not fucking things up, I went to take a step back, away from her. "Don't mess this up, bunny boy." But Abby did the only thing that could have stopped me in my tracks. She touched me, and not in an erotic way, she simply reached out and slipped her hand into mine. I tried to stifle the groan that ripped its way through my vocal cords, but instead I ended up squeezing her hand tighter in response, my chest heaving with every breath as we stared into each other's eyes. "Oh, did I hurt you?" she asked softly, stepping even closer and not letting go of my hand. I shook my head, afraid to speak, to shatter the perfect moment, us, alone, beneath the stars, the future of what could be a whisper on the distant dawn. Then she smiled with the radiant beauty of the sunshine peeping out from behind dark storm clouds. My ridiculously strong and muscular legs practically turned to jelly on me, and my soul sang like a bird on the wing. My mate was truly the most spectacular woman in the world. And no matter how many times I pinched myself, I still couldn't believe she was destined to be mine. "Okay, great," she said. "Then hop in and I'll drive you back home." Then she let go of my hand and slid into the car. I was left standing, frozen in place, utterly flabbergasted. "Ah, okay," I said to the cool night air. What else was I going to say now? I couldn't very well turn her down when she's very tangibly insisted. So despite my racing heart and twitchy feet, I went around to the passenger side and hopped into the car. "Which way?" she asked brightly, gripping the steering wheel and sitting up straight. I coughed to clear my throat. The easiest entrance is near the diner." She laughed softly. "Where I first spotted you." "Easily done. I know it well." Then she pulled the car out of the driveway and took off down the street, the scent of her sweet, sweet body filling the air between us and driving me wild. Focus on the pain, Pascale. Bite it down. You cannot let the need to breed take over. This must be on Abby's terms or not at all. If I scare her away now, I could lose her forever. I shuddered to think, and silently prayed to the heavens that I could keep my shit together for as long as it took.
Chapter 9. Abigail. I drove in the direction of the diner, with my breath lodged firmly in my throat, and my hands gripping the steering wheel just a little too hard to be comfortable. Licking my lips in the silence, I tried to steady my frantic heart. Pascale was in my tiny little car right beside me, his lovely fluffy silvery gray ears folded over as they touched the roof. Does that hurt him? Should I ask? He wasn't wearing any shoes, but he'd shoved his impressive shifter body into a pair of jeans and a sweatshirt again. I had to assume that certainly wasn't too comfortable. He'd likely feel much better if he were free and unencumbered by human-designed clothing. But I wasn't about to tell him to strip, especially not here and now. My cheeks heated at the thought, and I cleared my throat, striking up a conversation to detract from the annoying twinge I was nursing between my thighs. So, you'd be super busy around this time of year, right? I asked, knowing I probably sounded thick as a plant, but I couldn't cope with the silence or the ache niggling at me a moment longer. Yeah, too busy to be honest, he said with a sigh. It's all stations go in the burrow. We even have extra shifters working in the lead up to Easter Sunday. He paused, then gazing out his window at the stars before continuing. I'd been hoping to catch up with you at some point. I wanted to try and get to know you better, but between the Easter hours and the full-time bunny thing, I just haven't managed it. So please accept my apologies there. It's not been for lack of wanting to see you. Believe me. I frowned at him, throwing a look over to the passenger side of the car. What do you mean when you say, the full-time bunny thing? I asked, returning my gaze to the road ahead. I certainly don't want to become a roadside statistic. He moved in his seat as though uncomfortable. Well, the shifter thing, he clarified, his tone noticeably anxious. I wanted to ask you out on a date, but assumed you'd rather go out with me when I looked like a man. This form is not ideal. He blew out his breath in exasperation as he gestured at himself. I glanced over at him again, flashing him a broad smile before looking back at the road. I'd love to go out with you anytime, Pascale. And I would. It had been on my mind nonstop, and I'd sought relief in my little pink bunny-earned toy on more than one naughty occasion. He smiled, though I only caught a glimpse of it as I steered. I think we should wait until after Easter, he suggested. It would be best. I sighed at the expected response. I hated that he had such clear issues with his beautiful Easter bunny self. But I knew from years of living with my own self-doubt that what other people say doesn't change a thing. The change had to come from within. And obviously he wasn't there yet, so I had no choice but to agree, albeit against my true wishes. Yeah. I guess, I answered softly, unable to hide just how crestfallen I felt. He turned his body toward me, his expression crumpled with confusion. What do you mean, you guess? Don't you want to date the man, the real Pascale? I shrugged with a grimace. Sure. Okay, whatever suits. He groaned and pressed a large paw to his face. I glanced over at him with a frown. What's wrong? You're driving me insane, he said as if it were obvious, his volume raised. Me? I scoffed at him in instant disbelief. Hang on a minute, I'm not the one who doesn't like the whole rabbit thing. I'm okay with it. You have some serious issues to get over, Pascale. The real you is all of you, and the sooner you accept that, the better. I heard him grump at me, but I didn't bother looking over at him again, I just focused on the road. I fucking hated feeling this confused. Does he want me or not? Why is he actively trying to force me away from this part of him? And what is he so afraid of? It doesn't make sense. He's the freaking Easter Bunny. When we reached the diner, part of me was insanely relieved to know that Pascale would soon be getting out of the car, and I could speed away in a huff and lick my wounds of rejection in peace. But then the other part of me was already as fragile as glass, and sad that we'd be parting yet again. The conflicting emotions were hard to swallow, and made me feel more than a little tetchy with irritation. Before long I pulled up into the car park closest to the forest, away from the lights, and released the breath I'd been holding. Well, there you go. I glanced over at him to prompt action. He stared at me mutely with an intensity that didn't suit his bunny exterior at all, but what he didn't seem willing to accept was that I didn't see the fur and the cute nose, not really. I saw the man and the soul beneath it all, and it bugged the shit out of me that he was slamming on the brakes before even giving us a chance. Was he just afraid of being hurt? We all are, buddy. Aren't you going to go? I asked, gripping the wheel until the old leather squeaked beneath my grip. I definitely stepped outside of my comfort zone for him. If he couldn't do the same, then we were dead in the water anyway. He continued to stare at me and didn't respond. What the hell is he thinking right now? Frustration built within me with every passing second that he remained in my presence, and I was fast approaching my limit. I could feel it like a pot about to boil over. Look, it was nice to see you again, but I offered you a ride because I thought you were interested in me. But I was obviously wrong. And so was Amory. So can you just go now, please? I winced at the pleading tone in my voice, but I forged ahead regardless. I had nothing to lose at this point. We were clearly over before we'd even had the chance to really begin, and nothing I did or said mattered now. I'm exhausted, and getting embarrassed on top of everything else. Please don't make this any more awkward than it already is. I tried in vain to regulate my breathing. I was almost hyperventilating now, my chest rising and falling with simmering emotion. Pascale leaned forward, closing the gap between us, reaching for my face. His paws were so soft against my skin that I closed my eyes on a hopeless sigh. Holy shit. May I kiss you? He whispered, his breath warm against my face. A gasp tore from my throat and my eyes shot wide open. I could scarcely believe my ears. Was he going to try to get over his hang-ups and give this a chance? My heart raced and my whole body trembled against his touch. Without further prompting, I let go of the steering wheel and reached for him in return. Grabbing onto his hoodie, I tugged him as close as the car seats would allow. He wasted no time. Pascale made his move, kissing me hard and passionately, holding nothing back. I couldn't help the shameless moan that emerged from me as the kiss went on and on, for what felt like a perfect eternity. The fur on his face was softly scratchy, like a man with a full beard, and the heat that grew between us burned even hotter with every stolen moment. I pulled away suddenly, breaking the delicious kiss, determined to take action and do the very thing I'd been too afraid to do before. Will you come home with me? I asked with a breathless intensity that thrilled me and scared me in equal and dizzying measures. He stared at me as though assessing what I was actually asking, then nodded, his eyes blazing with the desire I'd be secretly been longing to see since I first met him. Is your place far? He countered. I reached for the gear stick and released the handbrake like a race car driver. No. 2 minutes max. My belly trembled with excitement as I drove us back to my house. I can't believe this. Pascale's hand slid over my thigh and gripped my knee in a sexily possessive manner. The move made me regret wearing jeans tonight. I wanted to feel his paws on me, all over me. I wanted to know what it truly felt like to make love to the Easter Bunny, the man, the shifter, and the myth. I wanted to experience him in all his magical glory. I pulled the car into my driveway and scrambled out, racing to the front door so I could unlock it before Pascale could change his mind. As soon as I pushed open the door, I felt his arms wrap around me from behind, holding me in place. My eyes slid closed as his lips kissed their way along my neck and nipped at my shoulder. It felt so incredible to be in his arms, and to feel his heat and strength surround me. Let me show you the bedroom, I said, pulling away to grab his hand and drag him inside. I managed to shut the door before us, before pointing to the room to the right of the hallway where the master bedroom was located. The bed wasn't made and there were clothes strewn on the floor, but I didn't give a damn. The fucking Easter Bunny is in my bedroom. Pascale picked me up in his strong fluffy arms and carried me to the bed where he placed me down gently. I began to strip, wanting to get out of my clothes as fast as humanly possible and beneath the sheets. My erotic Easter dreams flashed like a movie stuck on fast forward behind my eyes, and I bit my lower lip, aching with smoldering need and anticipation. It's happening. This is really happening. Pascale stripped off his hoodie, then stopped at his jeans, his gaze finding mine. I raised an eyebrow as I shoved my own jeans off the bed and tugged at my t-shirt. I hope you're not stopping there? I asked, my heart hammering in my chest. What was he thinking? Was he going to deny me bunny dick? He smiled and reached out to cup my face tenderly. For the moment, beautiful. Just trust me, okay? If this is real, we'll have all the time in the world. I nodded, and threw my t-shirt onto the pile of clothes on the floor. All right. Let's see where this goes. Lie back, he coaxed. I did as Pascale asked, shuffling up the bed to lie on my back. But a moment later, Pascale reached for my thighs and tugged me down the mattress toward him. I gasped at the feel of his soft paws on my skin, then raised my ass up as he grabbed my underwear by the elastic and tugged them down my legs and over my ankles. My belly quivered with excitement. He kneeled down on the carpet at the end of my bed and pressed open my thighs. I have been wanting to taste you since the first day I saw you, he breathed. What? I began to ask but froze a heartbeat later. Pascale set his lips to my inner thigh and nibbled his way up to my core, then licked my clit with one long languid swipe of his tongue. Oh my God! I cried out, jerking with immediate pleasure. Then he truly began to eat me. He slid both hands under my ass and lifted me up like a man starved, reverently bringing his meal to his mouth. He suckled at my aching clit, flicking his tongue over my hot flesh, teasing and working me from side to side in a maddening fashion. I cried out as pleasure assaulted me. Flames of delicious heat flickered inside my pussy, making me ache for him in a way that threatened to burn me alive with desire. When he moved his hands so that he could slide 2 thick fingers inside of me, I practically sobbed with relief. But he didn't stop there. He pumped his fingers inside my wet pussy, all the while his lips, teeth and tongue tortured my clit relentlessly. My hands curled into fists, tightening in the sheets beside me. I moved to reach for his head, then pulled back, unsure of where I should touch him. Oh! God! I cried out again, my belly clenching tight as my orgasm built to pussy-quivering heights. I could feel myself racing toward the edge, but I didn't want to topple over alone. I wanted him to come with me. Pascale! I moaned, his name like a prayer on my lips as I arched my back and raised my hips. He looked up and smiled at me. I need you to come like this, beautiful. Let me devour you. When I offered no further protests, he set his head back between my thighs, a man on a mission. How was I going to argue with that? I couldn't, or perhaps it was more accurate to say I wouldn't. I released the clamp on my sense of modesty, and allowed the sinful noises of my ecstasy to flow freely. I groaned and moaned, gasped and cried, making far too many carnal and inhuman sounds to count. If the Easter Bunny wanted me, there was no way I was going to hold back, not now. Pascale nibbled and suckled, lavishing me with the wicked talent of his mouth, pushing me higher and faster than I'd ever gone before. Then with a final flick of his tongue, and several deep thrusts of his furry fingers, he sent me flying over the edge and spiraling uncontrollably into a world of wild and unrepentant orgasmic bliss.
Chapter 10. Pascale. I had died and gone to heaven. Abby's pussy was as sinfully tasty as it was beautiful, and I was still in deep. Her milky thighs crushed against my head in a vice-like grip as she reached the crescendo of her orgasm. She trembled violently on the bed and cried out, her voice carrying throughout the house. Her pussy clenched and her body shivered around my fingers, and I reveled in every delicious shudder and shake. She is absolutely perfect in every way. I allowed myself to enjoy her screams, gasps, and soft sighs of ecstasy and happiness. These moments in time were fleeting, and I stretched them out as long as I could. I nibbled her inner thighs and nuzzled at her clit, staying exactly where I was, not wanting to move. But I could hear her coming down from her release-induced high, so the spell was bound to be broken any second now. Pascale, come up, she whispered, opening her thighs and loosening her grip on my head. Please. I surreptitiously used the sheets to wipe my face so that I could crawl up beside her and lay down, before pulling her protectively into my arms. I'd never ever in my whole life been with a human woman while in rabbit form, until this moment. It was unsettling to say the least. I was happy to lavish her with love, but to have her reciprocate. I didn't want that for her. Not now, not like this. It wouldn't work. Abby laid her head on my chest, and while I worried about my fur pressing into her face, her small hand brushed along my stomach, and she made no complaint. Aren't you going to take your pants off? She ventured. She wanted to have sex, and that was understandable, considering the attraction that burned so strongly between us. But it just wasn't possible. I kissed her lips, taking my time in exploring her mouth. When she began to unbutton my jeans, I grabbed her hand and broke our kiss. No. I can't. Her eyebrows drew together, and she looked hurt, as if she believed I was rejecting her advances or desires. What do you mean you can't? I mean, I can't. I said, not sure how to better explain it. I'd never had to before. My Anatomy is different when I'm in shifter form. Things wouldn't work between us. I still feel turned on and strongly desire you, but we just aren't compatible in my current state. I couldn't blush while in rabbit form, for which I was grateful. Otherwise, I would have died of shame in that moment. I'd be as bright as a beet. Abby's jaw dropped and her beautiful pink lips parted. Oh. I hope that doesn't change things between us, I said, keeping a tight grip on her out of fear she might try and scramble out of the bed in disgust. Instead, she threw her leg over mine and cuddled in even closer. No, not at all. Will it be okay when you can shift back? Is that the right term? She asked, gazing up at me. I kissed the top of her head, loving the empathy and understanding she was showing for a creature others might think an abomination. Yeah, that's perfect. And the short answer is yes, as soon as Easter Sunday is over, I'll be able to shift back to being human. Then I can fuck you as much as you want. She made a strange snorting scoff noise sound, then grinned up at me. Ah. I'm glad to hear it. I chuckled at the lovely pink blush in her cheeks. Well, the saying, go at it like bunnies, comes from somewhere, my love. And I'll be only too happy to show you what traits I still possess while in human form. She blinked up at me, her eyes growing a little wide at my speech. I thought I was being open and sexy, and maybe even a little crude for shock value. It was a combo I'd hoped she'd appreciate. Did you just call me my love? She asked, her gaze searching. Fuck. Too much? Too soon? Yeah, I did, I admitted, swallowing at the lump that was forming in my throat. She stared up at me, her expression strangely serene. A part of me wanted to pull away and find somewhere to hide, but there was nowhere to go. While a larger, more prominent part of me stood by my words. I hadn't said anything untrue. I just had to hope and pray I hadn't crossed a line and freaked her out. I really was happy to take all of this at her pace. I'd follow her lead, as long as her desires were safe and right for the both of us. Thankfully, she changed the subject. Hey, do you want to come chat with me while I have a quick shower? Sure, I said, grinning down at her. She kissed me quickly on the lips, then slid off the bed. The ensuite's on the small side, but come in. I followed her into the quaint bathroom, loving the view of her hips swinging and her perfectly round ass jiggling enticingly as she walked. She turned on the shower a moment later, and soon slipped under the hot water and began washing her hair and lathering up her body. I would have loved to get in with her, but there was no way I could show her my full rabbit body, nor clogging her sink with my fur. We still had time for all that, when had gotten to know each other a little bit better. Baby steps. Just take this one date and one day at a time. So, she said. Tell me why I feel like I need to ask you to move in with me, like, now. She posed the question so nicely and with humor, and yet the answer expected serious. I didn't know if I wanted to tell her the truth. Not yet. But if not now, then when? I leaned against the wall and stared at the bathroom floor. I'm not quite sure how to answer that, Abby. My mate smiled. Oh, I know. This is so sudden. But you know what I'm talking about, don't you? She asked. I mean, you don't think I'm crazy, do you? I lifted my gaze to stare at the beauty before me. She had her head slightly tilted back, water cascading over her long hair. God, she's a dream come true. I don't think you're crazy, I answered with small smile. It was all I could say for the moment. Taking the hint, Abby changed the subject again without missing a beat. So, what did you think about Amory's hair? I was thinking about doing something similar for Easter, myself. Maybe just a pastel pink and a pale lilac ombre to go with my blonde? I think that'd look quite seasonal. But I'm just talking a once-off rinse. Rainbow colors are a lot of work to maintain, and I tend to get kind of lazy with my own hair when I'm busy doing everyone else's. I smiled at the vision she painted, and I liked what I saw. Yeah, I think that would look amazing. She continued to wash her hair, pouring shampoo into her hands, then scrubbing her long blonde locks from root to tip. I didn't know what else to say, so I just watched her, appreciating the opportunity to drink in her beauty. Her pink nipples looked so tempting, just like juicy raspberries, and every time she turned or moved, her breasts bounced in a way that had me dying to pull her out of the shower so that I could lick, suckle, and ravish her all over again. So, are you going to explain to me what the whole attraction thing is? I sighed and straightened against the wall. You're really not going to let this go, are you? Abby's laughter filled the bathroom as she rinsed off her suds. No, because it's obvious you're hiding something from me. So just tell me. It certainly can't be harder than saying you can't have sex with me, even though we both want to. She was right, but then again, how the hell was I going to say this correctly? Well, and for the record, I didn't want to tell you this yet because I don't want you to feel like you have to be with me. Okay? So this is officially your last chance to stop me, to maintain the mystery and decide for yourself how you feel in your own time. I stared at her and waited. She simply grabbed the hairbrush and started working through the tangles in her hair. Nope, she said brightly. So out with it. Tell me. I inhaled sharply. It was finally time for the truth. She thought she was ready. And if she really was my mate, she wouldn't run or leave me, right? Fuck. It's now or never. Okay, so the thing is, you're my fated mate. It's like soulmates, but for paranormals and magicals. And I know you're not a shifter or a witch, but since you can see falling angels, I can only assume you must have some sort of magic in your blood. So, yeah. There you have it. Abby dropped the hairbrush, and it clattered loudly in the small wet space before she swooped down to pick it up again. Ah, sorry. My bad. That just wasn't what I was expecting. I shifted on my feet and gulped. Well, there it is. The truth. I'm sorry, Abby. She set the brush down, rinsed her hair, and turned off the water, her brow furrowed as she stepped out of the glass stall. Why are you sorry? Did you want another rabbit shifter as your mate? She reached for a towel, far too calm in my panicked opinion. No. I'm just sorry that you know, are kind of stuck with me now. The rule of fated mates are, now that we've met, we won't ever want to be apart. And I know you're keen to travel and see the world. Abby dried herself like she was used to doing it fast, wrapped the towel around her body, and then walked out the door. I followed after her, but the stiffness in her shoulders told me that I'd just pushed her into seeing that our relationship was not in fact going to be all sunshine and roses. What do you mean I can't travel? She said, her tone calm but terse as she pulled on her pajamas with annoyed and jerky movements. You can. I corrected myself, immediately regretting my choice of words. God damn you, Pascale. Of course you can. I misspoke. What I mean is that I'll miss you, and you'll miss me. Couldn't you just come with me? She asked, tugging on a pink pajama top over her wet hair. Then we wouldn't need to be apart. I stopped, a frown marring my expression as I thought about it. I've never actually left the city. I don't go far from the burrow, to be honest. I'm not even sure if I can. Well, we're going to need to find out, she said. I want to know what my life is going to be like. I stared at her, almost afraid to believe that I'd just heard what she'd said. You want to be with me. Still. You don't feel pushed or trapped or anything? She rolled her eyes and smiled back at me, filling my soul with the most profound sense of relief. No, I don't feel any of that. And of course, I still want to be with you, Pascale. But I want to know everything. What I can do, what I can't. And where we're going to live. She adjusted her pajamas and stood tall. Hey, can we go see your house? I gulped. She was being far more understanding and cooler about all of this than I could have ever dared dream. Like now, she asked, putting her hands on her hips, her brows raised. I'd opened a can of worms on this one now, and I had no idea how to put the jack back in the box. Shit just got really real and fast.
Chapter 11. Abigail. If I was going to be eternally linked to the Easter Bunny, then I wanted to know exactly what I was getting myself into. Obviously, due to issues of anatomy, we couldn't have sex at certain times of the year, which I could live with, but what other kinds of rules were they? I continued to stare at Pascale, brow raised, hands on my hips, hoping he'd get the message. It's almost midnight, he said sheepishly. Are you sure you want to go see the burrow now? Fuck it. I'd been exhausted before our intimate session, and had desperately needed sleep. In fact, I'd been an irritated, borderline mess. Now though, I was buzzing with energy. I'd had one of the best orgasms of my life. I was fresh, clean, and comfy. Well, I'm not super tired anymore. I've had a bit of a second wind, I told him, crossing my arms over my pajama top. But from the sounds of your hesitation, I'm guessing it's better to see your place during the day. Pascale smirked in response. Considering how well things were going, all things considered, that was a strange reaction, and it made the simmering flame of anger in my belly flare to life. What's so funny? I asked, confused. He shrugged. Oh, it's just the way you say my place, as if it's a house or a mansion or something. Well, what is it? I asked. Had he called it a burrow before? Like a real rabbit burrow? Amory had mentioned it was underground. And Pascale had made a passing comment about workrooms. I mulled the thought over. So, he lived in some kind of Easter Bunny community? Maybe that was more like it. Oh. God. Can I hack that? It's a burrow, he said simply. It's a system of underground, interconnected tunnels for all of my colony, including work and living spaces. Your colony. I repeated, gulping back the lump in my throat. As in all rabbit shifters? How many are there? He tilted his head as though thinking. Well, my burrow is specifically for those that work for the Easter Bunny and their families. Though most of the shifters who work for me are single and young, so it's not like we have too many kids living in our burrow. It's orderly if that's what you're worrying about. We have a system and a comfortable way of life. I had to sit down, my head was starting to hurt. Thankfully the bed was nearby. I threw back the covers and climbed onto the mattress and made myself comfortable. Okay, I said, trying to come to terms with it all. So you're saying you live underground together, and there's other burrows around the place with other rabbit shifter colonies? He nodded, walking closer to the bed but stopped short of getting under the covers with me. I forged ahead. And you've mentioned before that the rabbits that live with you work on Easter stuff. Do they actually make the chocolates? Wrap them? Prepare them for delivery, maybe? I felt like an idiot asking questions that I was sure he thought were juvenile or obvious, but I was definitely out of my depth here. I mean, I'd lived in a world my whole life where you go to the local grocery store to buy human-made confectionery, chocolate eggs, bunnies, and all manner of seasonal sweets. To learn the Easter Bunny was a real, in-the-flesh entity, and not only that, but that he played a key role in local Easter traditions just blew my mind. But Pascale's smile was beautiful, and it lit up his whole face. I reminded myself to remain calm, and take my time digesting all this new information. Our worlds were different, but with time and understanding, we could make it work, I was sure. And as I calmed down, I couldn't help but admire his incredibly muscled body and marvel at his strength. He must be the most handsome rabbit shifter alive. How about I show you everything tomorrow, he suggested. Then I can give you a proper tour? I nodded with a smile, and pulled back the covers for him, inviting him to join me, all the while steeling myself for the possible rejection that might be coming my way. Are you staying? I asked hopefully, my cheeks flushing with warmth. The Easter Bunny regarded me thoughtfully, his gaze softening. I'd love to, if you're okay with that? It was my turn to simply nod and smile. He climbed into bed with me, his fur brushing up against me as he snuggled in. As soon as he put his head on the pillow, I rolled over to lay on his chest. Can I say something without you freaking out? I asked, my heart skipping. He set his paw on my back and inhaled sharply as if preparing for whatever I might say. Yes? Go for it, he answered. I giggled and turned my face into his fur, nuzzling him and inhaling his scent. I love how soft you are in this form. He chuckled softly and lifted up my pajama top so that he could set his paw against my skin. I'm very grateful you feel that way. With his other paw he stroked my hair, brushing stray strands from my face. I closed my eyes expecting to lay with him, wide awake for hours, but instead, sleep came easily, and with a sigh of contentment I dreamed. I woke up to a sumptuous, hot-cooked breakfast just brimming with sugar. It smelled heavenly and the delicious aroma filled the house. "Wow, thank you," I said, my eyes wide with an instant hunger as I sat up and a plate of pancakes with melty chocolate chips was placed on my lap. "You seem to have a sweet tooth like the Cupids," I observed with an appreciative grin. Pascale laughed and sat down on the bed with his own stack. "Yeah, well, this time of the year is all about chocolate, so I do indulge, I must admit. The rest of the year though, not so much. We have a pretty well-rounded diet, just like most, I think." I cut up the pancakes and forked some into my mouth. I moaned. "These are so good, Pascale." The fluffy breakfast cake dissolved in my mouth, and I swallowed, ready to attack my next mouthful. "So, are we heading off when we're done?" I asked. He nodded as he cut into his stack. "Yeah, if we can. That would be great. My team will start to worry if they don't see me soon. As you can imagine, I don't sleep away from home very often." I grinned at him. "I'll take that as a compliment. Did you sleep well?" He groaned. "Amazingly well. Either I need a new mattress back at the burrow, or you need to sleep with me every night from now on. I feel so well rested." I stared down at my pancakes, not quite sure how to answer that. I was excited to figure this all out, but I didn't have any firm answers for him just yet, so I asked another question. "Is that what would happen if we decide to follow this fated mate thing?" Pascale choked on his pancake and started coughing madly to clear his airway, catching labored breaths in between each painful-looking spasm. I reached out to pat him on the back. But he stood up abruptly and paced the room, spluttering away until he cleared the blockage. "If," he managed to choke out. I stared at him, not understanding for a moment, then realized what I'd said. I misspoke. Bloody words. "Oh. I mean, it's fate, right? We will be. I just meant, like, maybe you could try living here. Or maybe we could live somewhere else. Does we have to be in the burrow?" Pascale was still struggling, that was obvious, and I hadn't helped matters. I could see it in his expression and body language, clear as day. I pushed my plate aside carefully and slid out of bed. "Sorry, I shouldn't have said it quite like that. I'm still new to all this. And I also didn't want him to think that I assumed we were a sure thing, just yet. That wasn't fair to him, or me. We might very well be fated mates, but the reality was that we barely knew each other, and it was still early days. We shouldn't expect anything special, not yet anyway. Love took time. We'd have to decide for ourselves, despite the pull and feel-good side of things, that we'd work out long-term." He nodded. "All right, let's just go. It'll be so much easier to explain once we're there." I knew he was right, but I still felt nervous about being thrown straight into the deep end of his world. "Never mind nerves. This is what you wanted, remember? Experience. Learn. Get to know him and see where all this goes." "Great," I said, bounding toward the tall boy drawers. "I'll just throw some clothes on and we can go then." "Cool. I'll clean up and see you out in the lounge," Pascale said, and before I could thank him for his hospitality in my home, he was gone with our dishes. I stared after him. Wow. A man who knew how to look after a woman. Who would have thought such a creature existed? I snorted aloud at my own joke, then stopped. What was I going to wear? I checked the weather app on my cell, and realized it was going to be a lovely warm April day. Time for a dress. My favorite was hanging in my closet, a light short baby blue dress with a bright white and orange flower print. Yes, this one. I slipped it on along with my best underwear, then grabbed for a pair of cute sandals. It was time to see Pascale's world, so I should run a hairbrush through my hair as well. I wanted to make a good impression, after all. 5 minutes later I was brushed, dressed and pretty. You look gorgeous, Pascale said, standing by the front door in his large hooded jumper. I grinned at the compliment and swished to and fro to show it off. Are you okay to go outside? I asked. Will your invisibility thing work? Pascale grinned at me in return before grimacing in the most adorable way. You're making me sound like some kind of superhero. I stepped right up to him, sliding my arms around his waist so I could bring my face close to his for a kiss. To me, you kind of are, Pascale. I tilted my head up in open invitation. He pressed his lips to mine softly but lingering, stealing my breath away in the most delicate way possible. Then he pulled back and reached out to open the door for me, ever the perfect gentleman. No one else should be able to see me, love, so you'll just look a bit crazy talking away to yourself. I laughed aloud at the mental imagery. That's okay by me. Let's go. It wasn't like the neighbors didn't think that I was a little strange already. I grabbed my keys and my tan handbag, then we headed out the door, ready to start our adventure. It was time to see where the Easter Bunny lived and worked, and meet some more rabbit shifters. My life had definitely taken a turn for the bizarre, and I couldn't be more excited about it. Rescuing angels was one thing, but this was something else entirely. I'd been wanting the chance and time to live my own life, to find love, and experience new things, and it finally looked like I was getting to. With a belly full of chaotic dancing butterflies and the sweet warmth of the sun kissing my skin, we set off toward the burrow.
Chapter 12. Pascale. I'd never thought I'd be so nervous taking someone home. I'd assumed, of course, that any lover or mate I'd be taking back to meet my family would be a shifter too. Not a human who had no idea that we even existed. On the being grateful for small mercies side of things, at least Abby was gifted. She could see us while regular humans couldn't. She could see paranormals and magicals, and having dealt with angels all her life, she stood a much better chance of accepting our strange world. Keep driving north, I said, pointing straight ahead of us. The easiest place to drive to is the M3 highway, then park in the truck stop off exit 25. Then we can walk from there. There are closer entrances, but those are more bunny-friendly than human-friendly. We're going to the secret front one, and it has stairs. She glanced over at me and grinned, clearly in a good mood. Well, I'm damn glad I wore flats then. I glanced down at her shoes with a smile. It's not too far, I promised. Hell, I'd carry her if she needed me to. I was more than capable, and truth be told, I'd do anything for my mate. That might actually be a bit of fun. Holding her in my arms as I stroll through the woods in the sunshine. The energy in the car shifted, and excitement fizzled in the air between us like lit firecrackers burning toward blast off. For the rest of the drive, neither of us spoke. I just rested my hand on her thigh and stared out at the world as everything whizzed by. When we finally pulled over at the most convenient spot for a car, she turned off the engine and climbed out, slinging her bag over her shoulder. Your burrow must be pretty well hidden, if this is the easiest way in. She shaded her eyes from the sun and looked around at the secluded spot. I slid my hand into hers as we navigated the path into the forest and toward the burrow. I can run pretty fast, I explained, which was a drastic understatement. And most shifters are good over long distances, so we don't really think about it, to be honest. But yeah, the location here would have been chosen originally to be as far away from humans as possible. We wandered on for a while in peace, and Abby seemed happy and relaxed. She was looking around, making observations, enjoying the beauty of the spring day, and smiling a lot. So, I began, thinking that I should really try and deal with the issues that my angel friend had brought up for me the other day. Amory mentioned in passing that you were interested in traveling. Have you made any plans so far? I asked. She turned to look up at me. Not anything solid yet. I haven't booked anything, no. But Amory's right. She knows me pretty well. I've always wanted to trek around America, and maybe even Europe too, she said, before her gaze shifted to the grassy ground. A wave of sadness washed over me at her forlorn expression, and I instinctively squeezed her hand. What's wrong, Abby? That sounds like a great plan. Would you come with me? She asked suddenly, then looked up again, her eyes searching. It would be so much more fun if you were there too. I'd never thought about leaving the burrow before. Not for any longer than a single night. What would I do? Where would we go? How would my rabbit shifters handle everything while I was gone? My heart raced and my head spun at the mere thought. It wasn't a good feeling. She sighed heavily as I hesitated with my response. Yeah. I know. You probably can't, can you? She sounded so despondent that it broke my heart. I had to jump in and say something more. I had to salvage her hope somehow. Oh, I can, I reassured her without really thinking it through properly. I think. To be honest, I've never left the state. I don't really know how it would work exactly. I'd have to look into it first, that's all. None of us had ever traveled far from home. We had a job that required out-presence all year round. It was our purpose. Easter might be our holiday, our busiest time of the year, but it took 11 long months of hard work and preparation to pull off that one joyous event for the world, and I don't think she quite understood that. And why would she? This is all alien to her. Even more so than angels falling from the sky. Her eyes brightened and her mood visibly lifted. So, maybe if we went for shorter times, like a few weeks here and there, we could go together. As long as it wasn't near Easter, she pressed, her sparkling green eyes even more prominent against the beauty of the forest. My heart ached as I stared at her, seeing her hope flicker as fragile as a candle in the wind, praying not to be snuffed out. Well, yes, I said. Possibly. I didn't have any human money, nor a passport or legal identification. That was all human red tape as far as we were concerned. We didn't need such things in our world. Everything was a lot more organic. Shit. How will I be able to travel without that kind of documentation? That's so great, she went on to say as my own mood began to spiral down. I've always wanted to go to New York and Vegas. Maybe drive Route 66. And that's just here in America. Europe would be incredible. All that ancient medieval history, it'd be like stepping back in time. Hey, what's wrong? She asked, noticing my mood shift. Oh, nothing, I lied. Just thinking about it all. It's a lot to take in. My life was so incredibly different to hers. I served the public. I spent my whole life creating gifts and treats for the children of the world. The idea of taking a vacation and leaving my home, my colony, I just wasn't sure I could do it. And why would I? Did I really want to see Vegas? It was a human cacophony of flashing neon lights and constant noise. And it would be overflowing with people, and based on what I'd heard over the course of my life, the sorts that frequented such places weren't always the best caliber of people. I didn't understand it. What was the appeal? Shows? Gambling? Expensive accommodation? I grimaced the more I dwelled on it. With every step we took toward my burrow, in the quiet of the beautiful woods, the more I realized that my world and Abby's most likely wouldn't mix. But how could I tell her that? The only way we could potentially work is if she were essentially willing to give up her human life and her preconceived ideas of what that entailed. She'd have to sacrifice everything and become Mrs. Easter Bunny. And from the sounds of it, that was the furthest thing from what she wanted. She just spent the majority of her life tied to one cause and purpose, whether she liked it or not. And now she craved freedom. I understood. I really did, and I didn't want to trap her or make her feel like she had no choice. This whole situation was beginning to seem more and more hopeless and dire by the moment. I sighed. This is beautiful, Abby said, glancing around at the tall trees and shrubbery. How is the burrow hidden? Like, is there a door or a hatch or something? I forced a smile to my face and gestured toward the entrance. It's just over here. She squealed a little in excitement and grabbed tighter to my arm. So, do you own all the land around here? Or is it national park land? She asked. I believe we own it, I said, frowning at the thought. I'd have to ask my manager though to know for sure. He knows more about all those details than me. I just ask for your safety, that's all, she clarified. The last thing you'd ever want is for the stupid government to decide that they wanted to build a new development here. That would endanger you all and be a travesty to nature. I stared at the beautiful spot, aghast at the very idea of it being destroyed. Nothing like that will ever happen if I have anything to do with it, I answered. I know, she gushed. You're amazing. I have no doubt you'd do everything in your power to protect your colony. Abby beamed. So can we go in now? I nodded and tugged her toward the entrance, my heart pounding. This is it. We stopped at the top of the hidden stairs, and I pointed down. The front door is there, but there are multiple entrances, as I've mentioned. Abby didn't move and clung to my arm. Suddenly her enthusiasm to explore the burrow evaporated, and trepidation took its place. It's completely underground, right? Are there at least any windows to at least let light in and the breeze through the burrow? I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of such a notion, but I refrained, knowing that would be a one-way ticket to a meltdown and blow-up town. But windows? In an underground burrow? That would be like opening windows in a submarine. Ah, no. No, there aren't. She stared up at me, her eyes wide and fear evident in her gaze. But how do you breathe? I squeezed her hand, offering her what comfort I could, and took a step down. Come on. I'll show you. It's safe, I promise. I wouldn't have agreed to this visit and tour if it wasn't. I'd never let you come to harm, Abby. I've got you. Abby took a deep, shuddering breath and nodded, gulping audibly. Okay. I trust you. I coaxed her down the stairs one at a time, and then hit the passcode to open the front door. The moment I pushed it open, she whimpered a little. Impatience at her anxiety warred with my need to keep her calm. I've lived here my whole life. I promise you'll be safe. There are bedrooms and a dining room, and several workrooms. We all live in the burrow every day, snug as a bunch of bunnies. Abby took another step down, her breathing coming in labored little pants as she fought the panic that clearly threatened to overwhelm her. I suppose it's just like a ship, right? She reasoned. Like when you go below deck. Exactly, I said, gently guiding her into the well-lit hallway. It's just like that. Now, I have to shut the door behind us, but we have lighting in every room and you're free to leave whenever you like, you know that, right? If you've really changed your mind about all this, we can turn around and I'll take you back to your car. No pressure. Abby glanced behind us at the only escape route she knew of and shook her head, her lip quivering. No. I'll be okay, she answered, though it was evident that she was still no less frightened. Come on, Abby. You said you trusted me, didn't you? I asked gently. She took a deep breath and nodded, pinching her lips together tightly. All right then. With a measured breath of my own and no small amount of trepidation over what was to come, I shut the door behind us. The angel agent was well and truly in my world. Abby was the proverbial Alice, and she'd just fallen headlong into Underland. All that remained to be seen was whether our adventure into the unknown would end the way all good fairy tales did, or not.
Chapter 13. Abigail. Pascale closed the door behind us, and just like that, my immediate access to fresh air and open spaces was gone. I was trembling with fear, but I pushed through. You asked to see his place, remember? You wanted to learn and experience. You can't wimp out now. These tunnels had surely been here for eons. Pascale lived, slept and worked here, and he was fine, as was his colony. It has to be safe. Right? Pascale's put his hand on my back and coaxed me forward. With every step I felt the solid earth beneath my shoes, and the walls were too close, and the ceiling was barely an inch above Pascale's ears. The restrictive proximity of my surroundings made me feel claustrophobic, and I had to remind myself to breathe. Hey EB, a young man called out, then trotted toward us along the hallway. I whimpered, then swallowed the noise down, immediately concerned that Pascale would think I was afraid of his friend. But I wasn't. I was worried that the rabbit shifter's jogging would bring this whole place down around us. The rabbit shifter stopped just in front of us, and eyed me with interest. Hello, he said, flip-flopping his ears as he spoke. Hi, I said, trying to smile but still gripping Pascale's hand like the anchor it was. James, this is Abby. Abby, James? Abby's a little worried about the infrastructure of the burrow, Pascale explained. She's not used to being underground. Do you think you might be able to help allay her fears? The other rabbit, while shorter and slighter than Pascale, carried an air of authority. He grinned at me. Oh, you don't need to worry about that. These burrows have been around for 4 generations. That's over 100 years. Rabbit shifters are excellent burrowers, and our construction is as sturdy as the earth itself. Really? I asked. The simple transfer of information coming from someone other than Pascale immediately helped to calm my anxious brain. This rabbit has no reason to lie to me. He's not trying to spare my feelings or protect me the way my mate is likely to. Wow. Well, that's really good to hear, thank you. And that little tidbit was something that was working to logically relax me. 100 years, a whole century with 365 days a year of regular use and bunny traffic. So, what were the chances something bad would happen while I was here today? Pretty slim. I'm giving Abby a tour of the burrow, Pascale explained. James continued to look me over with curiosity. You've never brought a human down here before, James said, leaning forward to sniff in my direction. She is human, right? And not just a shifter that I can't sense? I glanced from Pascale to James and back again. Despite the fact these two men were basically huge talking bunny rabbits, they were chatting just like any 2 college guys would at a weekend barbecue. It was a bit of a trip to witness. I actually help fallen angels, I managed to inject into the conversation somewhat confidently. So I'm human, but kind of exist on fringe of the paranormal world. I can see magicals. I grinned with pride. I'd successfully conveyed the new idea, and my connection to their world using the right terms. James glanced up at Pascale. That's certainly a unique ability, he said. So are you guys dating, or? His query was left hanging in the air, unanswered, and I deferred to Pascale to clarify. Finally, after hesitating for what seemed an unnaturally long time in my opinion, Pascale relented, confiding in his friend. Abby's my fated mate. James's eyes grew wide, then he thrust out his hand to Pascale enthusiastically. Congratulations, Eb, and you, he reached over to pull me in for an unexpected but welcome hug. It's so good to meet you, finally. I laughed, my cheeks burning as I hugged the big rabbit back. It's nice to meet you too. When James pulled back, Pascale grabbed my hand and tugged me back to his side. Thanks, James, he said, sounding a little anxious. Well, let's not tarry, shall we? Come, come. James said, gesturing to both of us. Come see the chocolate room. We're almost done there. I followed James along the hall, and although I wasn't keen on how dark it was, my eyes were slowly beginning to adjust, and I was finally able to discern the patterning on the walls and the paintings on the doors. God, this is really beautiful, I whispered with admiration, running my hand over an intricate nature carving. The Easter room is next door, James announced. I hurried after him, still clutching Pascale's arm, my childish heart racing with budding happiness at the fact I was about to actually lay my eyes on the Easter Bunny's warren. When I stepped into the brightly lit room, all I could think about was that I'd walked straight into heaven. Art supplies, paints and mounds of colored foil littered the room from floor to ceiling. Chocolate eggs and bunnies were piled high, some in baskets, others in boxes, and my mouth watered. There were 5 other rabbit shifters present, working, painting eggs and wrapping baskets with pretty cellophane. I'd never seen anything so amazing and positively magical in all my life. I stood there with my mouth hanging open, and I didn't even attempt to hide my shock. Wow! I breathed in awe, my eyes wide as I tried to drink in the scene before me. It's pretty cool, isn't it? Pascale asked from his place beside me, letting go of my hand so he could cross his arms over his chest like a man truly proud of his team, and no doubt he was. I gulped down the emotion that clogged my throat. I felt less afraid in this room. There were no windows in here, and yet the walls had been painted a clean eggshell white and the floors were tiled and sparkled. It was bright and light, and it felt better to be here than anything I could have imagined. I loved it. Who needs Vegas when you have all this? I whispered, mostly to myself. But when Pascale dragged me closer and squeezed me tight against his body, I knew he'd heard me. Thank you for showing me the magic that goes on here, James, I said with a genuine smile, as I reveled in the closeness of Pascale's body. You're most welcome, he answered. As much as I wish I could regale you with the history and beauty of our burrow, I have to get back to work and I'm sure Eb has got you covered. See you around, Abby. The friendly shifter headed off to talk with two of the others, and left us to our own devices. Pascale grinned down on me, seemingly more relaxed than he was when I first entered his world. And the dynamic of our adventure underground shifted for the better. Come on, I'll show you the rest of the burrow, he said. I promised you a tour, remember? I went happily with Pascale, and we walked through his home, chatting away as he explained everything there was to know about their Easter operations and life underground. Every room was temperature controlled, bright and light and beautifully decorated. Only the initial entrance to the burrow had been dim and dark. I could have smacked myself in the head as the realization of why that was struck me. Of course it was. It's to help the shifter's eyesight transition and adjust from the light outside as they come in. It's not scary at all. It's smart. God, I feel stupid for freaking out so hard earlier. Drawing myself back to the moment, I couldn't believe how relaxing it was, and how much I was enjoying the quiet and serenity here beneath the surface of the earth. The lack of buzz and noise in my ears from cars, phones, people chattering, and general everyday disturbances that made your ears ring when you finally found peace at night was immensely relieving. Sucking in a deep breath, I asked the question that had been lurking in the back of my mind since we'd arrived. Are you going to show me your room? I whispered up at Pascale, when we'd finally seen the last of the mess hall and the kitchens. He stared down at me for a time, then nodded. Sure, come this way. During the course of my tour around the burrow, I'd come to realize that all of the rabbit shifters were lovely and very welcoming. It was obvious they adored their leader and were happy for him to find someone, even if that was a human like me. Maybe this could really work after all. My stomach churned with butterflies at the thought. It seemed as if I'd been too quick to judge and too desperate to cling to my comfort zone. But now, I could see us compromising and potentially making things work, and that buoyed my spirit to no end. Well, here it is, he said, pushing open a door. I have a slightly bigger room than a lot of the others, being the Easter Bunny and all, but it's still not super lavish. I like to keep things fairly simple. I prefer comfort over style, I'm afraid. I looked around the room with appreciative eyes, and immediately felt right at home. The bed was huge and boasted a mound of plush pillows. The predominant color theme was a complementary palette of pale grays and matte blacks, and while I would have added a few more colors myself, it was elegant and perfect. This is so lovely, I said, wandering around the room. So you're not as worried about being down here anymore? He asked, seeming suddenly nervous after our nice tour. I sighed and sat down on the bed, running my hand over the soft covers as my belly tightened with longing. I couldn't wait until the day, or night, that we could finally climb into this bed together. Naked. No, not at all, I told him honestly. The tour and welcoming atmosphere here have really helped ease my anxiety. I offered him a smile, then tilted my head to the side in a combination of curiosity and concern. What's the matter? I asked him. You seem a little off. He put his arms behind his back and began to pace around the room. I have something I need to tell you, Abby, but I don't want to ruin this moment. You've adjusted so well, and this has really been everything I've ever hoped for, he trailed off. I sat up straighter and prepared myself for whatever was about to come my way. Pascale, you can tell me. I can handle it, I promise. If I could even seriously consider living underground with the Easter Bunny, I could likely wrap my head around just about anything. He sighed heavily and scratched at his fur. I need you to know that I'm not sure if I can travel with you. And it's not that I don't want to, believe me. I'd give it a go, but I don't have an ID or a passport or any of those documentation things, so I don't know how that would all work. I just wanted to be upfront with you and not give you false hope. I want to make you happy, Abby, and I'm willing to be flexible, but I don't know how to overcome human legalities. That's where my powers, magical or otherwise, end. I jumped to my feet and threw my arms around him, a laugh of relief bubbling up and out of me. You had me worried for a moment there. But oh my God, you've come to the right person. I pulled back from him with a big grin on my face. That's what my family does. We create ids for all the angels that fall all the time. We have a whole system, and it works flawlessly. I could get you one tomorrow if you wanted. Pascale's smile wasn't as relieved as I'd expected it to be, so I threw out the first truth that came to mind. I knew he had his own hang-ups about the human world, just as I did the paranormal one. Look, if you don't want to travel as much as me, that's 100% okay. I can go by myself for a week at a time maybe. I understand how you feel, seriously. Like you said earlier, it's a lot to take in, for both of us. You'd really be okay with that? He asked. I went up on my toes and kissed him. Of course, I answered. If you hadn't noticed, I've always been pretty independent. Most of my angel rescues have been done on my own, and I've had to drive far and wide to places I've never been. I'm not afraid of going new places on my own, Pa. Pascale smiled and my heart filled to bursting with joy. I could travel by myself, it was no problem for me, and I might have to this week, because I still had over a week to wait until I could jump the Easter Bunny's bones. Honestly, a bit of a solo adventure and a break from being an angel agent while you wrap things up for the holidays sounds like a great idea. Pascale shared in my excitement and embraced me tightly before he walked me back to my car. I had a bunch of things to organize because the countdown to Easter Sunday was on. And I can't wait. Chapter 14. Abigail. I had 10 whole days to survive until I saw Pascale again, so I was counting down the days until Easter like a kid with stars in their eyes, hungry for all that tasty sweet chocolate goodness. And God, did I want to finally feel his goodness inside me. We'd both agreed that with the Easter Bunny's deadline coming up fast, and our growing need to be with one another, it was probably best to just wait until I could see Pascale in his human form. I hadn't even asked him what he looked like. What color eyes did he have? What color hair, and was it short or long? The curiosity was eating me alive, but I had bigger questions on my mind. I had no idea yet if I was going to move straight in with Pascale, or I'd do some travel without him first, though I'd strongly considered it as a great way to pass the time between now and Easter. So the questions were piling up, so instead of making any major life-changing decisions, I spent my days seeing clients, visiting family, and cleaning my house, something I did exclusively when I was stressed and had an excess amount of energy to burn off. When I found myself driving toward Amory's place when I'd meant to go home, I decided to follow the universal nudge and go all the way. As soon as I pulled into their driveway, a huge sigh of relief flowed out of me. I had questions, and who better to ask than my two Cupid friends? If anyone had more information about magicals and the paranormal world in general, it'd be them. I didn't even get to knock on the door. Valentine walked out onto the patio and waved me in with a welcoming smile. "Hey Val," I said, kissing his cheek before stepping into the warmth of his lovely home. "Hey, is Amory here?" I asked, glancing around. "She's not actually," he explained, walking me into the lounge. "We got a call to help another angel, and she's on her way there right now." "Oh," I said, a strange twang of disappointment surging through me. "It's strange to think that I don't have to do that anymore," I admitted. "I've been doing it for so long, I kind of forgot what it was like to not. It's a bit weird to be honest. Though please don't misunderstand, I'm so grateful to you guys for picking up all this slack and taking this mission on board yourselves. It means a lot to us all." I sat down on the lounge chair and made myself comfortable. Val soon joined me, sitting on the couch and striking up a new vein of conversation. "Speaking of your newfound freedom, how's everything going with that?" I shrugged with a wry smile. "Really good, thanks. I've definitely got more time and money than I know what to do with. In fact, I was thinking of following my cousin's lead and buying into a property rather than continuing to rent." Valentine laughed, the sound infectious and full of joy. That sounds like a fantastic problem to have, Abby. Yeah, I guess it is. We were quiet for a while, and unlike Amory, Val wasn't probing me to death with questions. Instead, he was patiently waiting for me to spit it out, but I was having trouble getting my thoughts in order. Do you want to stay for dinner? Val asked after a while, glancing at the time. I'll probably just order in so we can get whatever you want. I inhaled sharply and forced myself to speak at the prompt, even though I didn't know what was going to come out. I'm worried about Pascale, I breathed. Val sat up a bit straighter, his brows furrowing softly, and thought. Why's that? Is there something wrong? No, not exactly, I said, chewing on my lower lip. But he seems to think that he can't leave the area. You see, I've been wanting to travel, but he's reluctant. I mean, there's all the issues with documentation, which he brought up with me. But I think it's more than that, and I don't really know what it is or why he's feeling that way. Val tapped a finger against his lip, then said, I suppose we're all like that in a way. We don't like leaving the place where our purpose is. It's like a connection I can't quite explain. Nicky Claus doesn't like leaving the North Pole, but he does it once a year. And I can imagine that as a rabbit shifter who has ties to the earth, Eb wouldn't be keen to go too far from home either. I sighed, an unexpected pain in my chest growing with each breath. That's what I was afraid of. Abby, you've only known Eb for a couple of weeks. I think you'll find that with time, he'll want to explore the wider world with you as well. As long as you're able to work around his obligations, of course. You mean the Easter Bunny thing? I asked. The fact he has to be present for the Easter holiday, and all the work that leads up to it. He nodded in confirmation. Then the strangest thought occurred to me, and I didn't really want to talk about it to a guy, but Amory wasn't here to confide in. So what choice do I have? I need answers. Go on, Val said. I know you need to say something. So out with it. Without a lot of other options, I was forced to forge forward. I've never seen Pascale in any form except his rabbit shifter. What if we don't click when he's human? What if? Val held up his hand to silence me, and I took the hint, allowing him to speak. I think you're worried about nothing of consequence, Abby. You're overthinking this. Pascale is Pascale. Whether he's in rabbit form or his human form. He's still tough and grumpy and loyal and sexy. Okay, so you're saying his personality won't change at all? So I shouldn't worry about whether or not we'll get along as humans, basically. Val lifted an eyebrow in amusement at me. I'd honestly assume that you'd be able to get along a lot better, actually. His smile led me to believe that he knew exactly what I was talking about. I looked away casually, so that I didn't blush and betray the erotic nature of my thoughts. Okay, well, I suppose I've only got to wait until Sunday to find out. He nodded. Yep. After Pascale has coordinated the final deliveries on Sunday morning, he'll be able to shift right back. The pull of his Easter form won't have a stranglehold on him anymore, he revealed. In fact, why don't you both come over here for Easter lunch? It might be nice to get together, all four of us, something like a double date. Oh. I swallowed hard and cleared my throat, feeling suddenly like a naughty girl with a secret. I had plans that didn't include roast lamb and the trimmings for Easter. Can I get back to you? I asked sheepishly. Val snorted out loud, then laughed a little. Sure thing. I'll leave the ball squarely in your court. But for now, how about Chinese or Italian? I'm starved. I ended up staying for dinner with Val, enjoying some delicious and sinfully creamy Alfredo pasta, then headed home with head overflowing with plans. I was going to color my hair and go shopping for a brand new dress. Because on Sunday, I was going to fuck the freaking brains out of the Easter Bunny. Easter Sunday morning. I woke up early and found a basket placed neatly on the end of my bed filled almost to overflowing with chocolate bunnies of all sorts. There was milk chocolate, dark chocolate, white chocolate, and even bunnies with sweet treats inside. Oh my! I couldn't stop the laugh that bubbled up in my throat. What a thoughtful, and kind of slightly creepy present. Do his rabbit shifters just let themselves into my house? Or is there some sort of magic they utilize that delivers these gifts directly into people's homes? I mean, it's not like they have keys or no alarm codes. Either way, I squealed with jubilation as I jumped out of bed and ran to the bathroom, ready to start my day. Pascale and I had been texting and sexting all week, and I was so twisted up in knots and horny that I was liable to go off like an epic New Year's Eve fireworks display the very first moment he touched me. Buzzing with elation and excitement, I combed and styled my hair, freshly colored and blow-dried, and dug into my chocolate while I anxiously paced around my little house. By the time noon rolled around, I was practically ready to leap out of my skin, just waiting for the damn clock to strike 12. As soon as it did, I grabbed my keys with a squeal of delight and raced for the door. I told Pascale that I'd meet him at his burrow, but as I closed my front door behind me and bolted for my car, I stopped. Frozen in my tracks, my breath hitching in my throat as my heart thumped madly like it had been jump-started with raw electricity. There was a man standing by my silly little red car. A truly beautiful man, breathtaking man. He was tall, and had rich dark brown hair that curled in loose spirals around his ears and a perfectly chiseled face. He turned toward me and our gazes met. Eyes wide, scarcely daring to believe a single word fell from my lips. "Pascale," I whispered into the quiet Sunday air. He grinned, and I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that it was him, my Pascale, my Easter Bunny, my fated mate. Without a trace of shame, I ate him up with my gaze. His shoulders were broad and his waist was narrow. He wore a simple gray t-shirt and a pair of old faded denim jeans. There was something so familiar about him, and yet, different. He walked toward me with bare feet, his incredibly deep and beautiful brown eyes drinking me in from head to toe. My heart skipped a beat. "Hi," I managed to say through a throat that was thick with emotion. My God, he's beautiful. No other word would do. He was just my perfect man in every way. "I thought I was coming to you," I began. He reached out and cupped my face, his touch electric and warm and everything right. "It's so good to feel you like this," he whispered. I closed my eyes as a wave of love washed over me unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Pascale felt like home. It wasn't a place like a house or a burrow, it was a person. A man. My home was wherever he was. The thought rippled through me with a power like a heavenly revelation, and I shivered against his touch in its wake. Screw Vegas and screw Europe. Who needs grand adventures when I have everything I need right here in the flesh? I wanted nothing more than to lie in this man's arms forever. There was no doubt in my mind. And with that, I didn't need to say anything else. I just took a step back with a cheeky smile and beckoned him inside my home, where my bed had clean sheets and I'd been feverishly dreaming about just this moment all week. And to my surprise, despite my giddy excitement and extreme arousal, my mindset had shifted. From, "I'm going to fuck the Easter Bunny," to, "I'm going to make love to the man of my dreams." Closing the door behind us, our Easter Sunday truly began.
Chapter 15. Pascale. Abby's hair was colored like a soft cotton candy rainbow, and her face couldn't have looked more beautiful if she'd posed up a storm. Her natural reaction was everything. When she'd first seen me, her face had been like an open book, and I'd been able to read every emotion that flickered across her face like words on a page. There had been shock, then desire, followed by happiness. Her beauty and hopeful spirit brought joy into my grumpy, run-off-my-feet world, and I couldn't believe we were finally here, face to face in the forms that would allow us to consummate our blossoming love in a real way. There was likely plenty to be said in future, but neither of us wanted to talk anymore for the moment. We'd done enough of that over the past few weeks, practically working ourselves up into a painful knot of raw, unfulfilled sexual tension. Abby opened the door to her home, ushered me inside, then shut the door behind us before leading me to her bedroom, the very place I'd had the deliciously wicked opportunity to eat her not so long ago. I glanced around at the squeaky clean room. She'd been working as hard as I had, it seemed. So, I began, not sure what was right to say in this moment when enough had already been spoken. "Thank you for the basket," Abby said suddenly with a cheerful smile. My eyebrows shot up. You received an Easter basket? I asked, my brow furrowing and my lips quirking. Her eyes widened in surprise, then she pointed to the basket on the end of the bed. Isn't that from you? She asked. I glanced across at the basket. It was one of those that we kept for special children, the ones who deserved the most love and happiness over the holidays. A grin stretched my face. No, not technically. I didn't ask my colony to send you a gift. I'd planned to give you something later, from me personally. That's from everyone you met the other day. You obviously made a wonderful first impression on them. This is their way of saying they really liked you, and that as a communal family, they approve of us. She stepped closer and placed her hands on my chest as she grinned, clearly delighted by the good news. My hands naturally went to her ass, her flesh filling my hands in the most satisfying way. You look so beautiful, Abby. How did I ever get this lucky?
Epilogue. Abigail. 1 month later. My passport was safe inside my backpack, along with Pascale's, and I was positively brimming with excitement and my fair share of fatigue. We'd been traveling for 2 incredible weeks, and like most good things, our time was coming to an end. We'd seen some incredible sights and immersed ourselves in other cultures. It was every bit as fulfilling and wonderful as I'd ever hoped it would be. And the best part was that we were able to enjoy it together. I'd literally got to have my cake and eat it too. I took a deep breath of fresh air and stared out at the wonder before me. The Grand Canyon in the flesh stretched out as far as the eye could see. This is amazing. Beside me, Pascale slid his arm around my waist, pulling me in possessively. It really is, you're so right. This was definitely worth the extra trip. A wave of sadness washed over me. I can't believe we're going home tomorrow. Thank you so much for coming with me on this adventure, Pascale. It's like a dream come true. I never could have imagined in a million years that my life would turn out like this. It's just perfect. Pascale kissed me on the lips, then smiled. Of course. It's been my pleasure. Besides, you know I can't sleep without your beautiful body by my side. I grinned up at him, my heart swelling as love flowed over me for this incredible, magical man. I really am the luckiest woman in the world. Then all of a sudden, he dropped to one knee beside me, knocking the breath right out of me. Oh my God. Pascale, what are you doing? I asked, glancing around at the few tourists in the nearby area. He pulled a black velvet box from his pocket, then popped it open to reveal the beauty within. I'm asking you to marry me, Abigail. My jaw dropped and tears filled my eyes as my hand strayed to my face in shock. Really? I gasped, my lower lip trembling with emotion. He grinned up at me. I figured that we should honor some human traditions as well, some not so human ones. I stared down at the most beautiful ring I'd ever laid eyes on. There was a large pink diamond in the center, surrounded by deep red rubies, giving it the appearance of a springtime blossom. Oh God. I can't believe it. It's so beautiful, Pascale. You shouldn't have. He'd been so worried about not being able to travel, about finances and rules. But we'd found out soon enough that the Easter Bunny had a bank account with a ridiculous amount of money, and his colony was more than happy to hold down the fort for a few weeks, while we explored the wider world together. I love you, Abby, so very much, so I have to ask, will you be my wife? I nodded, hot tears spilling over my flushed cheeks. Of course I will. Pascale took the ring from the box and slid it onto my left ring finger. Then he stood up, his dark eyes boring into my soul. I squealed in unbridled joy as he picked me up and spun me around just like the handsome heroes in movies did. I love you, I said. I love you so much. I'd initially been so fearful of what life with Pascale would mean for me. Living under the ground. Rules and restrictions. No sex with a shifter anatomy that I didn't understand. But ever since Easter Sunday, everything had been amazing. It had just all fallen into place, like the final missing pieces needed to complete the jigsaw of our lives. I learned new things about Pascale and his incredible extended family every day, and I thanked the universe daily for making me the Easter Bunny's fated mate. My life had truly never been better nor filled with more joy than since the day I first met Pascale. And we were living proof that fairy tales existed. We would live our own enchanted lives somewhere snuggly between the normal and paranormal, straddling that decidedly furry and fuzzy line. And can you believe it? I'm going to be Mrs. Easter Bunny. Amory was right after all. Turns out you really can't take the Cupid out of the angel. The end.